This episode of Derek and Matt Love Comics recorded October 14th, 2018. You can find Derek and Matt Love Comics on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and TuneIn. Contact the show at derekandmattlovecomics@gmail.com, facebook.com/derekandmatt, Twitter @derekandmatt, and on Instagram @derekandmatt. You can also listen to the show and watch other videos that we may do on YouTube at Derek and Matt Love Comics. Enjoy the show. Hey yo, comic book fans, it's Matt, and you're listening to Derek and Matt Love Comics, the show where two friends talk sci-fi, movies, animation, comic books, and all things we geek out about. With me, as always, is my fellow paranormal investigator, Derek. How's it going, Derek?
Not too bad. I'm a little nervous about us going around with these untested thermonuclear, I forgot the line.
He blew the line. Unlicensed nuclear accelerators.
Thank you, unlicensed nuclear accelerators. Yeah, I blew the line. Can we get a do-over?
Seriously?
No, I'm joking.
Oh, I would have done it for you.
Oh, yeah. Our listeners
all right,
know
that deserves
all the time.
That deserves a.
Wait, okay, that even sounded worse. What I just said.
I didn't hear what you said. I was grabbing my whiskey.
Oh.
That deserves a shot of whiskey.
I'm half awake, anyways.
Well, I'm not half drunk, but I am maybe slightly tipsy. Also had a weird day, so hey, let's get on to what we've been doing. Let's do what we've done together last. So we'll go to you. What you've been doing first.
Well, as I mentioned last week, I was watching Two Broke Girls Season 6, which was the final collection, or final season, last collection I finally picked up last week. I ended up actually finishing it the very next day.
Okay.
And yeah, that's something that's done. Nothing really to say. I will say one thing. I'd like to know who behind the show had a hate on for Amy Adams, because they couldn't go more than, 5 episodes without having a slam against her. That went on for like 6 years.
Well, that's just weird. Who could ever say a bad word about Yummy Adams?
The showrunners and writers for Two Broke Girls, apparently.
I seriously want to look this up now and find out who had a problem with her and why.
Well, okay, I can't remember their names, but I know that the creators of the show it's King. I can't think of his actually.
Michael Patrick King.
Who created? I believe he's the guy who created Sex and the City, and then Whitney Cummings, who was the abrasive female stand-up comedian who, the same year that this debuted, she had her own show debut called Whitney, which got horribly slammed. So she was actually creative control behind 2 sitcoms that year, which was
on 2 different networks. It looks like.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. It could be either of them that disliked Amy Adams, but man, they can't. There's at least 2 slams against her per season, I think. It was kind of like a running gag, I guess. But yeah, I don't really want to go into too much about that show. We're done. I'm finished it. I'm sure I'll probably end up rewatching them over time. Other stuff. Last night I started, or I was going to say re-listening to, but resumed listening to the Lore podcast. I ended up listening to, I believe, somewhere between 8 and 10 episodes in the last 24 hours. Good, creepy, interesting stuff. The funny thing, though, is whenever he brings up topics, I think he's going to focus on one thing in an episode, but ends up just getting a passing reference. And all I'm thinking is, you could have a complete episode based on just that one story. It's because, there's a lot of material that gets mentioned in the podcast that I haven't heard before, but there's certain things that I've heard a lot about since I was a kid.
Okay.
Like in the next couple of episodes, I think coming up that I'm going to be listening to soon. One is going to be Elizabeth Bathory. So I'm kind of interested in that one because I've been reading about her since I was a teenager. Because I always kind of found her fascinating story, if not exactly a pleasant one.
Right. Yeah, she's always interesting, at least.
I always think that the connection between Dracula and the character of Dracula and Vlad the Impaler has been really overstated over the last couple of decades, and I always think that it's really underestimated how much of an influence Elizabeth Bathory was on Stoker, because I think there's a lot more connections there. Really, the only thing that connects Vlad the Impaler to Dracula is the name Dracula, and I believe Stoker never even traveled there to the area. But there are a lot of more parallels between the character of Dracula and Bathory. For one thing, the nobility rank and the whole idea of killing young women and that, and drinking and bathing in the blood, and it's all there. It's all vampirism.
Right.
So I'm interested in seeing how that's going to be mentioned when I get to that episode. And the other thing that I've done this past week alone is I watched the Doctor Who Series 11 premiere. Oh boy, I should have opened my notes before we got into this. Just quickly looking for them in here somewhere. Professional podcast. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the episode was actually really good. It wasn't the best Doctor Who that I've seen, but it was very clearly a Doctor Who episode. I thought it was a really good jumping on point for new viewers.
Oh, that's good, because I'm going to try to watch it, actually.
I recommend it. I thought it was fun. I really don't get the hate about Jodie Whittaker going into this after, because I've seen a lot of people complaining and the whole thing attacking the whole very notion of a female doctor going in. I think we even discussed this last summer whenever the announcement was made.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've discussed this, and certainly a lot of people have discussed it.
I will admit that up until I watched the episode, I was concerned that she might not be able to pull it off, just because I had only seen her do very sober, dramatic roles. I'd never seen her play anything remotely eccentric, and I was worried that she might end up being very stiff. But no, I thought she was really fun in the episode. The second episode actually aired just a couple hours ago, but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But yeah, she was cute, she was funny, she was all over the place. What you would kind of hope for a female doctor. The one thing I really liked about her version of the character is we're kind of used to getting abrasive doctors, and ones where even when the doctor is a little more charming, and he oftentimes is still a little bit of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been the case with certainly Peter Capaldi's doctor was, especially in his first 2 years, very abrasive. I think it's actually refreshing that we have, with Whittaker's doctor, the 13th Doctor, we actually have the first genuinely nice doctor since, I believe, Paul McGain's 8th Doctor from the TV movie from the late 90s.
Yeah, I thought the trailer portrayed her as a genuinely nice person, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, she seems to be someone who genuinely cares about people, and she's not insulting people left and right. I mean, this was just her first episode I saw. Over time, that could change.
Right. I mean, you turned around on Capaldi, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to say I hated Capaldi, but he just didn't really appeal to me his first season. And then his second series, I didn't watch as many of the episodes because at that point I was just sick of the character of Clara, his companion. Although I watched the beginning of the season, I watched the end. But whenever I watched Series 10, which was the series from last year, within moments of the first episode of that series starting, I was on board because all of a sudden he went from being grumpy grandpa to being cool grandpa. And he just clicked with me, and I thought he was a joy to watch and fantastic in that final season.
That can happen. That's what happened with me with Jessica Jones and during Defenders.
Well, the thing that's funny about that is that he went from being I always say I don't dislike any of the Doctors, but he went from being probably the one I liked the least to, in his final season, I think he might be my third favorite, if not my second, because he was just so fun in his last year. And
that's cool.
There have been a couple of Doctors where I liked them at the beginning, but by the end I kind of got a little tired of them.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Smith is kind of like that. He was still good in the role. It's just by that point the show had kind of wore me down a little. But as it is right now, with having seen one episode, I like Whittaker's Doctor. I am looking very much forward to seeing how she's going to play throughout the rest of this season and going on. Hopefully she's going to get the full 3 seasons that has kind of become the standard now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no one wants to stick around for more than 3 now.
So, I wanted to bring this up quickly. I think you and I talked about this off air, but did you see the Twitter exchange with Neil Gaiman talking about how much he liked the episode and someone deriding him for his opinion?
I'm assuming it was what I saw, because I saw someone attacking Gaiman's opinion.
Well, let me read it.
Saying that he was obviously not actually a fan.
Yeah, let me read it because I've got it right here.
Okay.
Gaiman says, "I just watched The Woman Who Fell to Earth. That was definitely the Doctor. Not that I had any real doubts, but it's wonderful to see how much of the Doctor she is." And someone, I won't read their name, responds, so you're a new fan because the Doctor is a woman and not a real fan of the show since the 1960s then. And Gaiman says, "My first episodes of Doctor Who were the first William Hartnell Dalek story. You can read all about it in my introduction to the first Doctor Who novelization."
Hey, someone sent me that, and I said to them, Neil Gaiman's actually written episodes of Doctor Who. It's nuts. Oh my god.
And you know what? I've never watched Doctor Who, and it's never been of any interest to me. And if I do, I'm not going to watch it just because it's a woman. I'm going to watch it because there's buzz on this. And if I do watch it and I like it, and this is my first episode, and it gets me into the show, then who cares? How am I not a real fan because I didn't watch the episodes back to the 60s? I hate that mentality.
I will admit that after Whittaker was announced, I kept seeing people posting, or more often women posting, saying, well, now I can finally watch Doctor Who.
They did that on The Flash last year, and I hated it.
Right, and I thought, well, why couldn't you watch it before? And that kind of bothered me. And there is certainly a bit of that mentality out there.
No, there's idiots on both sides.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people who, well, I never watched it before for whatever reason. I mean, you've been aware of Doctor Who almost your entire life, correct?
I mean, at least since high school, because I had a friend in high school who was really into Doctor Who. That's probably my earliest recollection of knowing about Doctor Who.
Okay. I've known about Doctor Who since I was a small child, and I would catch random episodes and bits and pieces growing up in through from late 70s to the mid 80s. But then I didn't really watch it until the 2005 series launched, and I got excited because I thought, well, here I can get in on the ground floor. And I've been watching it steadily for 13 years now. So who cares? There are going to be people who just, for whatever reason, have not watched the show before. And then this happens, and it's a brand new, fresh start after 8 years of the different, the previous showrunner and era. So everything about this is brand new, and it's a perfect launching point. Who cares what gets people watching it if it gets them watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I always say about comics that every issue is somebody's first.
Right. I've been saying that since I was a kid myself, because that's the slogan I heard a lot when I was growing up. I wish the publishing companies would remember that.
But I hate when I see, I see shirts all the time, like on Facebook. Like a D&D shirt. I was playing D&D before playing D&D was cool. Well, you know what? Good for you. Like, I had a guy come in the other day, and he was buying dice, and he was like 26, and he had never played D&D before, and he was just getting into it, and he was asking me about it. And I kind of had to catch myself, because I was like, wow, it's crazy that you're just now playing it for the first time. And he kind of thought I was giving him that type of attitude. I'm like, no, I think it's great. I said, I think it's great that working here, I see people of all age groups starting their first D&D game, you know? I thought it was great when a 55-year-old woman who had never read a comic book in her life came in the store and bought a stack of Wonder Woman trades after seeing the Wonder Woman movie and then became a full-on comic book fan. I think that's great. And who cares how they got there or if it wasn't the real way to do it, because there is no real way to do it.
That's idiotic. I'm 42 years old. I have been reading comics since I was 3. And so, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. But I have a friend who is online who is 32. She is originally from Japan. She never read American comics until 8 years ago, after she moved to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And she got so into American comics, she's one of the few people I can have in-depth conversations with about stuff, just because she basically devoured everything. And she's only been in it for, relatively speaking, a few years. I think that's cool.
No, I think that's great.
Amazing. It just irritates me whenever, because what we're arguing about is gatekeeping.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think a large part of the hate that people have had for the idea of a female doctor, and this is a concept of an alien being that since 1966 has the capability in story of turning into a completely different person. And since Tom Baker first brought it up in the 1970s that the Doctor could become a woman and be played by a woman, that's 40 years. That's 40 years of this being a possibility, and it finally happened. And I think some people don't like the idea of their, like they think that they have, you know, I've mentioned this before, that whenever you're a fan, you kind of get a feeling of ownership. And I think people are so possessive of this that the idea that the female Doctor would be bringing in outsiders frightens them. And all I can think is the more the merrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
All it means is more Doctor Who. Doctor Who has less chance of getting canceled now. I'm excited. The story potential and the possibilities for stories expanded to a huge degree the moment that they cast a woman as the Doctor, because you can suddenly start developing and doing other stories that you couldn't do whenever with a male Doctor. And the fact that Jodie Whittaker is the current Doctor does not mean that the next one won't be a guy. Although I imagine if that happens, we probably will get fans who were brought in to Doctor Who now saying, well, they're going back to being a guy, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, or they make the next Doctor someone of color, or, you know, and then people lose their, oh, he's not British. It's a black guy, or it's a Hispanic. What's going on? You know, everyone's going to be mad about it. There's a certain sect that are going to be mad if it's not a white British male.
Oh, yeah. Here's the funny thing. Jodie Whittaker was not my preference, and she was completely left field. I never would have considered her. In fact, the only thing I knew her from before she was cast was for Attack the Block, the sci-fi horror film that came out around, I can't remember the exact year, I think 2009 or so. The thing that's funny to me is the top 3 actors I wanted to play the next Doctor, not one of them was a white male. Because my picks were Tilda Swinton, I thought would have been phenomenal as the Doctor. Olivia Williams I thought would be really good. And Benedict Wong was my other major choice. Because I thought he would have been really fun, because he's done a lot of drama and comedy.
Right.
And he's done genre stuff.
Now, not to drag this conversation out, but did you see the Bond producer this week saying that Bond would never be not white or not male?
Well, all I heard was that the producer said that Bond would never be a woman, Because
I believe they also said. Well, they did specifically say a woman. Yeah, you're right. And I don't remember if ethnicity was mentioned. But
the Bond situation's different, and
well, that's what I was gonna say. I agreed with the explanation she gave.
The thing is, if you cast Bond as a woman or as a black man, it completely and totally alters the character, top to bottom.
Right, which is what you were saying about Superman in a previous episode.
Right. You end up with something completely different. The thing with Doctor Who is it's different to begin with. It's going to be a different person as the Doctor every couple of years. So, and there's nothing in story to limit the Doctor to being a white man.
Right. No, it's a different situation.
Right. The only thing I ever say the Doctor has to be is someone from the UK.
Which makes sense.
Because I don't want to see the show's unique Britishness watered down. That's my only qualification for someone who's going to play the Doctor.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I thought the Bond thing was interesting because I happen to agree with this. I agree with the summarization of let's just make more characters to fill these niches instead of changing characters to be what, but again, Doctor Who is a character who's the whole point of them is that it can change into something else. So
yeah, I mean, I had another point, but really, we're just gonna be running around in circles at it, right? Continue. But yeah, it's just certain characters lend themselves to reinterpretation. Other ones don't. I'll give you an example though. If you were to do Superman as, and I mean the official Superman, or not like an alternate universe take, as cast them as black, or James Bond as black, or as a woman, you have to change the world to make it still work, because there are complications and issues that would be brought up just by that notion, that change. I can't remember if I've ever mentioned it on the show before, but back in the 90s, Patrick Stewart had said that the character in Shakespeare he had always wanted to play was Othello, which is the character is a black Moor, and he realized that he couldn't play that role without it being racist, because traditionally the character was played in blackface by white actors. So in order to play Othello, Stewart actually mounted his own production of Othello with reverse race casting, so that in the original play, all the characters are white, with Othello as the black Moor at the center of the story. And for Stewart's production that he ran in American theaters in the 90s, he cast himself as Othello, and the entire rest of the cast was black, so that you still had that dynamic of the original play, which is without it becoming offensive. And I thought that was brilliant, and that's the kind of thing you would kind of have to do to make the characters work without it being a completely different animal, completely different story. But with Doctor Who, it's built into the machine that this can happen, and it simply finally happened. That it took this long is the big shock.
No, yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I enjoyed the first episode. About the weakest thing I thought was the villain. There's a point where the villain was kind of cool. It was kind of like a Predator type thing, where it's a alien hunter that's hunting a human on Earth as part of like some coming of age type ritual thing.
Okay.
I thought it was the character looked cool. Everything was neat until there's a pivotal. Also, I can't speak. Pivotal moment where he takes off his face mask and you see his real face, and it's supposed to be terrifying and disturbing, but it was really silly, and from that point on the character seemed kind of pathetic to me, and no longer worked really as a real threat. And the other issue is I thought the actors playing the new companions were really good, and the characters are interesting for the most part, but I thought that they were overshadowed by a fourth character who was a companion during the first episode, who is not going to be one of the regular companions for the rest of the season, and that was a bit of a letdown. But, as I said, overall, I enjoyed the episode. I thought Whittaker was funny. I thought she was charming. And I'm really excited about the rest of the season. So, yeah, if you want to give it a try, do it.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I think it should be on my on-demand because we get BBC America. So, okay, on to what I've been doing. I read some comics. I sort of... I guess don't take this the wrong way, but I sort of read a bunch of comics that were things that I had a backlog of that might be on my chopping block. I wanted to kind of get them read and out of the way to see if I was going to continue to subscribe to them or not. So I read X-23 issues 3, 4, and 5. Now, I really liked X-23 number 1. I think I talked about it on the show. I'm sure I did. And number 2, mainly for the characterizations of Laura and Gabby, her younger sister. But the villains that they had put in were the Stepford Cuckoos, and there was a whole thing about the clones having birthdays and everything, and that was with, like, the start of the story. So 3, 4, and 5 finished the story out, and I still like the characterization of Laura, and I still like the characterization of Gabby, and everything else was a mess. Because it's all, like... one of the Cuckoos dying, and then one of them turning evil, and then this one's possessing Laura, and then this one's possessing Gabby, and then they're having a fight, and I think Laura is possessed in this scene, but I'm not sure if she's possessed in this scene, but I'm pretty sure she's not possessed in this scene, and I don't know what's going on half the time. Like, literally by the end of it, I could not tell you when she was possessed, what the point of any of it was. I could not tell you what the story was. And then it ends with, like, a wrap-up of Gabby and Laura at a party at the X Mansion, where their characterizations are great, and I really like the interaction. But, like, the meat of the story was just all super confusing, and I couldn't understand any of it. I was completely lost. The other one I read was issues 4 and 5 of Deadpool, which I had not read. Fortunately,
before we get into Deadpool with X-23, is it on the chopping block still?
No, I canceled it.
So okay.
I liked the characterizations, but if I can't understand the story, then what's the point? You know?
Right.
With Deadpool, I read issues 4 and 5. A disappointment that number 4 had a different artist for the issue. Like, I've had a fill-in artist. This was a case of... I started reading the series because it was Scotty Young, and they were doing a funny Deadpool, and I appreciate that. This stuff continued to be funny. I don't think I'm going to keep reading it because at the end, it was funny, and I did enjoy most of it, but it also felt fairly pointless and inconsequential, and it's kind of the type of thing that I feel like I can dip in and out of and not necessarily have to read constantly. Honestly, I felt the same way about Spider-Man Deadpool when it started a couple years ago, which it's still going. It's up to like issue 40. And I think if I picked one to read, I would probably end up reading that one instead.
I'm
but
amazed the one's still going.
I know, yeah, I know. It was part of All New, All Different, and it's still going.
Yeah, I would have assumed that it would have been canceled after 12 issues or less during one of the constant yearly reboots that Marvel does. Or, I'm sorry, relaunches.
Right. The other thing I read comic-wise is I read the first 2 chapters of the comic book story of professional wrestling, which is exactly that. It's a comic book history of pro wrestling and also a comic book explanation of pro wrestling. And it is a really fun read. It is a really neat cartoony style, and it starts way back, in the 1800s with wrestling getting started in America, and the parts that I've read go from the early beginnings with Hackenschmidt and Gotch and their initial feud, and then the original Goldust trio, which is Toots Mondt, Ed Strangler Lewis, and who was his promoter? shoot, I can't think of his name, but it was two promoters and a wrestler that basically were controlling, the controlling the world title at the period, and the end of the chapter was Tootsmont meeting Jess McMahon. So we're getting into what'll go into Capital Wrestling, which will then go into WWE. But yeah, really fun read. Obviously the guys who worked on it love professional wrestling, and they're trying to do it as a love letter. Super fun. TV, I watched the first 2 episodes of The Curious Creations of Christine McConnell on Netflix. And yes, it is a cooking show with a supermodel housewife who loves all things creepy and macabre, who is seconded by a group of macabre Muppets. I'm going to say Muppets because they're from the Henson Company, even though they're not actually Muppets. But yeah, these puppet creations that hang out with her, and they're in her big creepy house on this mountain as she's making, the gothic cakes. And she made a coffee cake in the one episode that was in the shape of a old style coffee percolator. So it was actually a coffee cake made to look like a coffee pot. She made gift baskets in the one episode that were really cool. It had like these chocolate peppermint horns, and then these pre-packaged together things where all you had to do was add hot water, and it made it into cocoa, and then you'd stir it with the peppermint horn, and all these things like that. Really fun stuff. She is adorable, and I want to marry her. And I'm just gonna throw that out there. And the puppets are really funny. So the whole thing works. It's a weird combination of stuff, but the whole thing works. It's like spooky Sesame Street for adults.
The thing that gets me is 2 weeks ago, you and I did not know that this show was coming, or that it existed or was about to exist.
Well, I saw her talking about it on her Instagram probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, but it was very recently.
Well, for me, it was just 2 weeks ago because all of a sudden I saw a headline mentioning it, and then last week the trailer came out, and the trailer completely sold me. I'm actually surprised at how quickly it came out after the trailer. I thought we would probably get it closer to Halloween, but I didn't know it was actually out already until I started seeing people talk about it in the last 24 hours. So I've got to look for it and see if I can find it so I can watch it.
Yeah, it's very fun. I watched the first 2. The puppets are crazy, and like I said, the humor is slightly adult, but in a very tame way. And yeah, I just enjoyed it.
Well, when you told me that earlier, I made the point that could be a very good description of the original Muppet Show, because the original Muppet Show in the 70s was aimed at a primetime adult audience, but it wasn't just supposed to be exclusive to adults. Kids could watch it too, and there were innuendos and jokes that were aimed at adults and not kids. I mean, kids had the Muppet series that was aimed at children was Sesame Street.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing about this show that does not sound appealing to me.
And then movie-wise, I watched the 1991 Addams Family, which was on my list of Halloween films to get through. Not really going to talk about it too much. I always liked this film. I always liked the Addams Family growing up. We've talked about that before on the show. Yes, it's different than the show, but God, Raul Julia and Angelica Houston are just so good in the movie, and the comedy bits are good in the movie, and quite frankly, Christopher Lloyd's good in the movie as Fester.
The casting in that film is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, and Christina Ricci is such a strong performance for such a young age, and you really kind of, or at least I did, kind of forgot that I haven't watched the second one yet, but obviously I've seen it before, and she does a fairly good amount of aging between the first and second, so she really is a little girl in this. She seems a little more self-aware in the second one, where she understands the humor she's doing, and it's a little more teenaged, but she is a little girl in this movie. And whether she was smart and witty enough to realize what she was saying, or they just managed to coach her through, I don't know, because she's small in this. But yeah, everything's, yeah, there's some contrivances, and the plot twist of it's Fester, but it's not Fester, but it was Fester all along is a little hacky. But the sword fights are fun. The Mamushka's fun. Seeing all the other Addams family members from around the world is fun. Like the movie's just a fun movie. It's a great representation of Addams Family.
My favorite thing in those movies is the chemistry between Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. Dude, they are just phenomenal together.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I love Raul Julia as Gomez. He's probably the one thing that I would say I absolutely prefer in the movies versus the TV show. So, and that's not to knock John Astin at all. So, but yeah, it's just he pulls. Gomez was supposed to be the Latin lover guy, and he pulls that off better. Mm-hmm. They're both childlike, but I think Astin's more childlike.
Yeah,
I watched, and we'll get into some other Universal films that we watched together, but I watched Ghost of Frankenstein after we watched the 3 Frankenstein films last week together. Ghost of Frankenstein being the 4th film. I have seen it before. I had not seen it in a very long time. I found it both perfectly fine and utterly forgettable. It is a okay Frankenstein movie. You know what you're getting when you watch it. There's nothing, it's not this groundbreaking piece of horror like Frankenstein, or this amazing performance that only lasts 3 minutes like Bride of Frankenstein. There's a Frankenstein monster there. There's, the mad scientist. There's the angry mob. It checks all the boxes, but nothing in an innovative way or a new and exciting way. It's just like, right. Okay, yeah, this is a Frankenstein film. It's not bad in any way, but it's not like memorable either.
It's good, but it's not challenging.
Exactly. And it does suffer from the idea of, oh, well, we'll go to the other Frankenstein, because Wolf Frankenstein, played by Basil Rathbone in the last movie, had a brother that we didn't know about, but Igor somehow knows about him, and they're going to go talk to him instead. So it does seem like, oh, well, it's basically they couldn't get Basil Rathbone to come back, is what it feels like. So that's a little whatever.
We don't have the budget for Basil Rathbone,
and
so let's go.
Let's go. Right. And Chaney plays a perfectly acceptable monster, and Igor Lugosi as Igor is great, because Lugosi was great as Igor in the previous film, and he does the same thing over again. So again, not a bad film, but like it's another Frankenstein film that they made. Finally, I took my mother to see A Star Is Born this afternoon because, well, I've been wanting to see it myself because it was getting a lot of acclaim, and then she said that she wanted to see it, so that was the thing that I did. And wow, I don't know what to say about this movie because I don't want to get into spoilers, although my research after coming home finds that it basically follows the plot structure of the other versions of the same story, that it, because it is a remake. So
okay, I just want to quickly say that you and I just had a huge discussion of this movie like 30 minutes before we started recording.
Yeah, while we were setting up recording.
And the thing is, I have been aware of the story of A Star Is Born since I was a kid, because there have been so many versions of it, and it never dawned on me that it was supposed to be a tragedy.
Well, okay, so you're getting ahead of it.
I'm sorry. I think I've seen some of the 1970s Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson version, but I now realize I've never seen the entire movie.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, wow.
Okay, so
I'm sorry. I pushed this a little too further than you wanted to go. But,
well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to avoid spoilers when it does the same thing that 3 other versions of the film does. Right. It has the same outcome as 3 other versions of this film. That said,
films that have been in the public consciousness since the 1930s. But the funny thing about that, though, is it's been in both of our consciousness since we were kids, but neither of us knew how the movie actually plays out.
Right, and now I think my mom did, because my mom was my mom is both a fairly big Streisand fan in the 70s and was also always a huge Judy Garland fan. So I'm going to assume that she's seen both of those versions.
Yeah, I have to assume that my father has seen the 50s version simply because he's the right age to have seen it. And my dad went to the movies basically every week when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm. But I did not see the ending coming, and I won't. You know what? I'm not going to spoil the ending in case you haven't seen any of these other films and you're looking forward. What I will say is that Bradley Cooper was great, and I don't see how he doesn't get an Oscar nomination for director on this, because the movie is just perfectly strung together. Lady Gaga was great. The movie is, I said it on Facebook that it was terrific and soul-crushing. I mean, this movie will move you to tears in a second, and not even just the overall, like, conclusion of the movie, like, just parts of it. There's just, like, the part where she sings on stage for the first time and, like, is both happy to be doing it, but also, like, almost breaking down because she can't believe it's actually happening. And, like, you feel the emotion in all of that. Like, they convey it perfectly. Sam Elliott was really good as Bradley Cooper's older brother in it. Andrew Dice Clay was really good as Lady Gaga's father in it. It was just a phenomenal film from beginning to end. There was so much good stuff in this film. It is an Oscar-worthy drama, and the first half makes you. So this is how I felt by this movie, because I was super pumped up by the first half and then super, like, deflated by the second half. The first half makes you go, you know what? I should get off my butt and go out there and chase my dream no matter what it takes, because this is what happens when you chase your dream and get it to come true. And then the second half of the movie goes, oh, just as long as that dream doesn't involve the music industry. Because, like The Doors or Walk the Line or Ray or any number of real-life musical biography films that I've seen, it's always, I'm on the top of the world. How could this possibly go wrong? Hey, look, drugs.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So, yeah, as Homer Simpson once said, don't trust people in the music business. But no, I loved this film. I came home and I downloaded the soundtrack, and I'm going to be listening to it later tonight. So, she has some great songs in it. He has some great songs in it. Who would have thought Rocket Raccoon could sing? The movie is just completely full of surprises. Like, who would have thought Andrew Dice Clay could be an amazing dramatic actor?
Yeah, the thing that really excites me is Lady Gaga, because I knew she got quite a bit of acclaim, and I've seen bits and pieces of her performances in the last few American Horror Story seasons.
Yeah.
And I knew that she was getting into more acting, but I've been hearing Best Actress Oscar talk for her, too. And
it wouldn't surprise me.
You said Bradley Cooper for Best Director, but I've been hearing him for Best Director and Best Actor.
I'm saying Best Director at the very least. Yes, he probably deserves it for Best Actor as well. The thing with Lady Gaga is I've kind of been aware for the last few years that underneath the showmanship exterior, and I mean, frankly, when she first started, she was basically just doing an updated version of Madonna. Mm-hmm. You know, but I've been becoming more and more aware of the fact that underneath that was an extremely talented person.
Oh yeah, the first couple of years, all I knew her for were the outrageous outfits and the stage persona, and I didn't really know her music, and I didn't really know whether or not she could sing, or if she was another one of the cookie cutter bubblegum whatever pop stars where they're auto-tuned to death. And then a couple of years into her career, I started seeing her performances on stuff where she would be playing the piano and singing unaccompanied by anyone else, and I was just, my God, she can actually sing, and she can play instruments, and she's also a writer, and then I started seeing stuff where, like, there's a really cool video on YouTube where she's being interviewed. I can't remember if it's on Howard Stern or if it's something else, about how before she made it big, she fronted a Led Zeppelin tribute band, and she demonstrated by just start screaming out "Black Dog."
Okay.
And I just watched it and go, "Oh my God, she is incredible."
Yeah, and you know what? The movie plays on some of this because it gets into like the character of Allie is like a really good songwriter and a piano player and singer, and she is scared to sing her songs in front of people, and she's been told her whole life that she doesn't have the right face or the right look to be a musician. But then as she starts getting big, they start turning her into like every other pop star. Right. You know, and she kind of like ends up losing what made her special to begin with.
Yeah.
You know,
Lady Gaga has this really weird position for me in regards to, I still don't really know her music. I'm sure I would recognize some of the songs if I did hear them and someone said, that's her. But, like, I have had nothing but respect for her for a long time, and I actually admire her outside of just that. Like, the whole thing with, I remember whenever she started wearing the outfits started getting more crazier and that, and like, whenever she showed up, was it the Grammys or the MTV Music Awards, where she showed up in the meat suit?
Right.
And people were like, you know, trashing her about certain aspects of that. And I kept thinking, this is all an art project. Because the whole thing was that she was basically taking modern art and putting it into a performance. And then all her outfits, all the outrageous stuff and all that was all this like performance art statement. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought what she was doing was brilliant. Like, Madonna was constantly reinventing herself throughout her career, but she always seemed to me, it always seemed like she wasn't really initiating new styles, and that just that she would get on in the early stages of something that was already happening. Like whenever she went techno was already happening, for an example. Whereas Lady Gaga was pushing boundaries of fashion and stage performance before people were ready for that kind of stuff. So I've always really respected her, and she's actually someone I admired for quite some time. It's just funny, I just never got around to actually listen to the brunt of her music catalog.
Yeah, and you know, I've had not nearly to the same level, but I've had similar ideas and opinions about Katy Perry, because my ex-girlfriend was really into Katy Perry, and it all comes off like all the stuff you hear on the radio, and her videos and stuff are all like fairly standard bubblegum pop. Mm-hmm. But then to listen to her albums, there was always like one or two tracks on each album that was like an extremely powerful power ballad or something like that, where you'd go, oh, this person actually has talent. This is just the thing that the record companies made her into.
Right.
And on those one or two songs on this album, she gets to cut loose and do what she wants, because they're not going to be singles and they're not going to get released on the radio. Which, you know, that's an odd thing for me to say now. That is one of the reasons I respect Taylor Swift, because she basically does her own thing. It's her own thing could be looked at as bubblegummy, but she writes her own music, plays her own instruments, sings her own songs. You know, she is very self-made.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Beyonce, and whenever you start looking at the writing credits for her songs, and there's like a dozen guys
right
writing each song, whereas I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe Lady Gaga, for example, just like Taylor Swift, is relatively in control of her own career,
right,
and her own material. It's just with Gaga, I respect her for her talent and her abilities and her mind, and also that, to me, she's beyond just a musical artist. I think she's also a visual artist, and just an artist in general. She makes life an art form.
Right.
I find that fascinating. I find it brilliant.
I mean,
I'm a fan of her.
In a completely different way.
Quite a fan.
Right. Mm-hmm. I was going to say in a completely different way, but in a very similar way to, say, someone like Andy Kaufman.
Right. It's about the artifice.
Mm-hmm.
it's about more than just the message. It's, there's an old saying that the medium is the message, and I think that's very much true when it comes to Lady Gaga, because she turns every aspect of her career into an artistic statement or political statement or statement on like human sexuality or gender or whatever. And I think she's a brilliant person, and the idea that she's now also being proven to be this incredible actress, I find it very exciting, and I'm hoping that she's going to end up with this like incredible acting career. Because remember, I grew up in this period where Cher went from being a pop star to suddenly becoming an Oscar-winning and critically acclaimed actress, and she did that for like 8 years, and then just stepped away from that, which disappointed me because when I was a kid, Cher was one of my favorite actresses because she did so many movies where she was just brilliant.
Right.
And then she just walked away from that at the very height of her movie star credibility and award-winning period. And the thing is, I hope Lady Gaga gets an Oscar for this film, and I hope she's going to continue doing, big, interesting, dramatic performances, and then maybe eventually we can get her in a superhero movie. Because that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is not the type of thing we normally talk about on the show, and it's not my typical type of movie, but every once in a while there'll be a movie like this that is out of my normal realm of interests that I just hear enough good stuff about, so I check it out. I think the last one like this was La La Land, which I did really like. So,
I agree with that completely. Because when I was a kid growing up, I watched basically every type of movie. There wasn't really anything I didn't really care for. Over time, I got sick of gangster movies, and to this day, I'm kind of done with them. But other than that, I mean, I grew up. It was late night, and if there was a movie like I would watch B movies. I would watch schlock films, but I would also watch if there was a really big dramatic movie that was being aired in the middle of the night. I would end up watching that. Rain Man is a movie that I love. There's a whole bunch of like dramas that I'm a big fan of, and so it's like it's not really. It's not the typical thing I'm usually going for if I'm looking for something to relax with, but I will watch definitely something like A Star Is Born.
All right, so what did we do together?
Oh boy!
After that, this is going to be interesting.
Well, I'm looking at the list, and in order, it's a heck of a lot of movies. I'm sure we'll probably just kind of gloss through them all.
Yeah, well, we'll hit some highlights here.
Right, but in the center of that, we have The Flash Season 5 premiere, so maybe we should just mention that one first.
Flash was good. It was a good start. I really, really liked XS. I don't know the actress who's playing her, but she was incredibly charming.
Oh, yeah, she was adorable.
She's basically playing a fangirl, and it completely works.
Yeah, I believe she's a Canadian actress. The thing I find shocking is that she's actually 34 and she's several years older than Grant Gustin and I just forgot her name, who plays Iris.
Right, because she's their daughter from 30 years in the future, and they are not yet 30.
Right.
Neither the actors or the characters on the show.
But it's also shocking to me because if I had to guess her age, I would have said 25.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you.
She does not look mid-30s.
It was fun watching her do stuff with Barry, and it was fun, watching her like, oh, this is the time then this happened, and they're all like, shut up about the timeline,
There was a couple things I thought were kind of weird and goofy in the episode. Is it okay we talk about spoilers for this episode?
Yeah, mild spoilers are fine.
Well, the thing I was going to bring up, I'm not sure if I can actually say it.
Just go ahead. Spoiler alert. Just go ahead.
Okay. It takes Barry a while to realize that he wasn't there for her childhood, and he asks her, what happened to me? and then we get the cut to the two of them looking at the headline where Flash goes missing from that newspaper headline that we've been looking at for 4 years.
Right.
And that Barry disappears in a quote-unquote crisis in 2024. And I'm watching this, and all I can think is, didn't he read the article? His daughter comes from the future and says that something happened. He wasn't there for her childhood, and she never had a relationship with him. And he doesn't immediately go, oh, that's probably related to the newspaper that I've been looking at for 4 years and worrying about that says I disappear, possibly dying.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. So
I just thought it was a really bizarre beat. I understand if the whole reason was just to remind viewers or new viewers who haven't been aware of it, but it's always kind of been one of my criticisms of Barry in this series is that at times in order to facilitate exposition, they make him dumber than he should be. This is something that, I mean, if it was me, I would be obsessed with this, knowing that there's this headline that predicts my disappearance, if not death, within 6 years. I would be obsessed with this. I would be very much aware of it.
Right.
And for him to forget that, I just find it mind-boggling. The other thing is, I thought it was funny because I'm watching the episode with you, and we get to a point, and I'm going, oh my God. Before anything really gets mentioned, I have this realization, Barry wasn't around whenever she was a kid. She's come back in time. This is going to end up being something like the first few parallels to the first few seasons where Barry is wants to undo the untimely death of his mother, Nora.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I wonder if this is going to be the thing that she came back in time to either just to see him or to prevent his disappearance or death or whatever. I wonder if how long they're gonna play this out before it gets mentioned. Oh no, it's mentioned in the very next scene. I was like, wow, they hit that note really quick. I wasn't expecting them to get to that for a while. I thought they would like push it off. It kind of reminded me how quickly they went through. Oh, Barry's convicted of murder and he's sentenced to life in prison. And, oh, no, he's out 2 episodes later.
It was 3 episodes. I honestly don't remember.
I think we only got 1 episode of his life in prison. Because we had him get sentenced, 1 with him in life in prison with Goldberg. And then we got 1 where the next one ends with him basically escaping or... I'm just surprised. I'm just amazed that they hit that dough. I thought for sure they were going to drag that out. It's also, it's like whenever he created Flashpoint, and I thought, oh, we're going to be living in this Flashpoint world for quite a while before he fixes it. Oh, no, they reverted back at the end of the first episode.
Now that one I totally agree with you on.
But yeah, it was a fun episode. It was enjoyable and felt a little bit revitalized after the really weird 4th season.
Right. Okay, so we also did watch a bunch of movies, as Derek mentioned. Just kind of quickly go through them. We watched Beetlejuice, which is always fun. I picked up the Hot Topic exclusive Beetlejuice and Lydia pop figures this week, and it was on my list of movies to watch anyway. So yeah, Beetlejuice, what's not to like?
Yeah, I know, I love it. It's just an entertaining, fun film.
Yeah, it is. We watched Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which we've gushed about before. So actually, besides you not watching Ghost of Frankenstein with me, I've watched all the Frankenstein films this week, not counting House of Frankenstein. Because I don't know, the House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein movies, I don't know whether they should be counted or not. I mean, they're part of the franchise, but he's barely in both of them.
They're very, very poor films.
Is this the best Abbott and Costello film? You haven't seen as many as I have. I think it is. It's really good. It's super solid. I mean, it very successfully blends 2 things that I really, really love, the Universal monsters and Abbott and Costello. Now, there's other Abbott and Costello meet monster movies that are okay, but this one, it's like them at the top of their game, perfect, good, great back and forth Abbott and Costello stuff, mixed in with stuff right out of the other Universal monster movies. Frankenstein almost at his best, Dracula almost at his best, possibly the best performance of Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, by Lon Chaney in the entire series.
The thing, I believe that this is the best Abbott and Costello film, and one of the things that I love about this movie is that it works on both fronts. It is a great Universal Monsters movie. It's also a great Abbott and Costello comedy movie, and it can function as either of those, and it does so at the exact same time, because you can watch it as a straight horror movie from 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
That just happens to have a couple of funny comic relief guys.
The crazy thing... Oh, go ahead.
But it's also a great comedy. It never betrays the monsters. Okay, one of the other films that we watched this week was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which is... I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not a great movie.
Yeah, it's definitely not great.
Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein is basically what that movie should have been. It just so happens to have Abbott and Costello in it.
Yeah, I mean, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is the first time they put two monsters together in one of these movies. And it's like the whole idea for the movie was we're putting two monsters together. We didn't think of anything else beyond that. We're just putting two monsters together. You know, whereas Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, there's three monsters, and they're all given something to do. They all have their own plot. Mm-hmm. You know, Frankenstein's monster is barely in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
The thing about it, though, is just the way it plays both genres. Well, we're kind of at a point where we're a bit used to that with stuff like Shaun of the Dead, but this is the original film to do that.
No, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Because Shaun of the Dead, and people think it's a spoof of zombie movies. It's not. It is a harrowing, disturbing, dark zombie movie. It just so happens it's also a very funny romantic comedy, and it functions on both levels without betraying either, because that climax of Shaun of the Dead, when the two of them are trapped in that sub-basement and they think they're going to die and they try to commit suicide and they can't, that is devastating. And this comes just after he had to kill his mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking, but it still works as the romantic comedy. And Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is the original film to do that, where it does two things at the same time, and it is completely successful at doing both. That's why I think it's actually, if anything, I think the movie's underrated, which is incredible to say, because this is generally regarded as one of, if not the best Abbott and Costello films, and it's really well loved. But I mean, I think it's a brilliant movie.
It is absolutely. Like, the only thing that would have made this movie better, and I'll always go back to this, the only thing that would have made it better is if Karloff played the monster.
Oh God! Oh, if Karloff had agreed to do it, this would. Oh yeah.
But I also completely understand.
Happened.
I also completely understand why Karloff didn't agree to play the monster, because
is that Karloff was worried that they were just going to be making fun of him.
Okay, I've heard that, but he also played the monster for comedic effect in other things. Because there's actually a deleted scene from The Secret Life of Walter Mitty where he plays the monster for comedic effect. It didn't get used in the movie, but he agreed to do it, and he did it. So I don't know if that really factors into that or not. I'm not sure. I think it has more to do with his age. Lugosi was in his 60s playing Dracula here, and Karloff had to be close to that, right?
I'm not sure which one was older, but yeah, and Karloff's knees and his mobility had started to deteriorate by this point.
I'm kind of surprised. I just looked up on Flickchart for Abbott and Costello, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is their highest rated film. It's 1,230 of all time. The next one is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I'm not sure I've seen.
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it since I was 11 or 12.
The next one is Hold That Ghost, which I have seen, which is fairly funny. It's one of their earlier ones. And then the next one is Meet the Mummy, and the next one is Meet the Invisible Man, and the next one is Meet the Killer Boris Karloff. All of those are horror comedies. And then finally, number 7 is Buck Privates, which is what I would actually put as their second best film.
Yeah, everyone remembers the horror comedies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed actually that Meet the Killer Boris Karloff is that high up, because that movie just, if you'll remember me talking about it on the show, it essentially bored me to tears. Like, it just nothing happened in that movie. It just was so stale and stagnant. I'm surprised, but you know what? It's probably a lot of modern people not being super familiar with Abbott and Costello, seeing Boris Karloff's name and watching that film.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So yeah, and to round out the Universal stuff, we watched the original Wolfman as well. So the thing about the original Wolfman that I always liked is Kurt Siodmak, however you pronounce his name, wrote it with the intent that you could have filmed it without ever showing the Wolfman. That his intent was you never find out whether Larry was actually turning into a werewolf or whether it was all in his mind. The studio didn't go for that. They were making a monster film. They wanted to see Lon Chaney in the werewolf makeup, you know. But it's interesting, even with seeing the Wolfman, you can kind of watch that film and still wonder whether he's imagining it or not.
Oh yeah, that really plays out with the climax of the movie and the aftermath. If we're talking about the Universal Monsters films, the Wolfman, I believe, is the last great one that they did. Before they eventually did Creature from the Black Lagoon, but that came out like 10 years later.
Right, years later.
I would actually put the Wolfman as my third favorite Universal Monsters movie.
I mean, it's probably better than Dracula, but I've just got such a soft spot for Dracula because of the history that I have with the film.
For myself, I go with Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman, Son of Frankenstein, Dracula, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon are the ones I consider the best. Invisible Man is the first one, and Invisible Man Returns are probably close after Creature.
Okay, so back to Flickchart, looking at the worldwide rankings for the Universal Monster films. Number 1 is Bride of Frankenstein.
Actually, I need to check out and see what my actual rankings on Flickchart for the series is.
Number 2 is Frankenstein. Number 3 is The Invisible Man.
Which is crazy to me. I mean, it's a good movie, but for it to be the third is shocking.
Number 4 is Dracula. Number 5 is The Wolfman. Number 6 is the original Lon Chaney Sr. Phantom of the Opera, which I kind of feel like is a cheat because I know it was made by Universal, but is it? Do you feel this way too? I only consider the Universal monster movies to be the Frankenstein movies starting with the original Frankenstein, the Wolfman movies starting with the original Wolfman, the Dracula movies starting with the original Dracula, the original Invisible Man series, original Mummy series, and original Creature series. I don't really look at like Murders in Rue Morgue and any of the silent stuff that came before, Werewolf of London, She-Wolf of London. I don't really look at those as being Universal monster movie proper. But
I give a lot of respect and props to the original Phantom of the Opera. I don't think any of the remakes have ever come up to the impact of that movie or the imagery in that film. It's a movie that I consider one of the greatest movies of all time, but I don't really think of it as a Universal Monster movie. I don't think the Universal Monsters films really began until Dracula came out. And Universal did a lot of horror movies in the 30s that I don't consider Universal Monsters films.
Right. Both.
You mentioned Murders in the Rue Morgue. I'm assuming you mean the version with Bela Lugosi.
Yes.
That is an incredible movie. That is a pre-code horror film, which when I originally saw it 10 years ago, it stunned the heck out of me because there are images and situations and things that happen in that movie which just I couldn't believe they got away with for the period. Like the way he disposes of the bodies and corpses of people, which is just like, it was just alarming when you consider the context of when that movie came out. The other one is I believe 1934, The Black Cat with Lugosi and Karloff, where they are both definitely the co-leads. That is an incredible horror film. That's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And that's Universal, but I don't consider it a Universal Monsters movie. But it is a horror movie.
Yeah, both Wikipedia and Flickchart consider all of those Universal monster movies, as well as the Man Who Laughs, the original Hunchback of Notre Dame, Cat and Canary.
Oh, this is interesting.
So,
yeah, I'm looking at my Flickchart under my rankings for the Universal Monsters, and yeah, number 1 is The Bride of Frankenstein. Number 2 is Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. Number 3 is The Black Cat. Number 4 on here for me is Son of Frankenstein. The Wolfman's number 5. Frankenstein's number 6. The Invisible Man Returns is 7. Dracula's Daughter is number 8. I actually genuinely believe Dracula's Daughter is the best Universal Dracula movie. The Invisible Man's number 9, and number 10 is Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Oh, so the list that I just gave, the next one would have been Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and then Creature from the Black Lagoon was after that.
Oh man, I'm surprised at how low Dracula is on my Flickchart. It's 17 out of them. 11 is Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and 12 is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So yeah. Huh.
So non-Universal related, we also watched Poltergeist, which was only my second time seeing the film.
That's one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, I know. It's a solid film, and it has a couple of moments that really are really standout moments. I particularly really like the paranormal investigators coming to the house and them talking about, oh, well, we experienced this and we experienced this, and they're describing such minor things, and then they show them the room, and then it cuts to her like trying to hold the teacup and her hand shaking. That whole sequence played out great. You pointed out the last 10 minutes of the movie, it's just people screaming about things.
Yeah, everyone's screaming at everyone else. No, I love this movie. Diane Freely, JoBeth Williams' character, I have said in the past, is one of my favorite movie characters. I think she's fun. I think she's a great example of a strong, caring female character in movies. She kind of has a bit of a Ellen Ripley.
I was going to say, she definitely went to the Ellen Ripley school of being a badass mom.
Yeah, and while also still being very warm in that. This is a movie that I have been seeing continuously since I think it was 12 the first time I saw it, and to be fair, the movie does not scare me. It has not scared me since I was a teenager. A lot of that impact has gone away just for the sheer fact that I've seen the movie just so many times. But it's one where I still love those beats in this film, and the way it's structured, the way it plays out, the pacing, and the effects work, and everything. It's all still there. It's still great. I would love to watch this with someone like, I don't know, one of my nephews or my niece and see how they would respond to the movie.
Right.
Someone seeing it fresh. That's why it was a little weird. It was a little weird for me last year because whenever we watched it together for the first time and it was your first time seeing it, I was worried you were just gonna dislike the movie because, as I said, I don't necessarily find it scary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of thought, well, that you wouldn't like it because it's not really scary. But I still think it's a great roller coaster film, and with incredible performances and relatable characters.
Yeah, I mean, I really like everything Craig T. Nelson does in this movie.
Yeah, one of my problems with I have the sequels on DVD, and the second film I like, the third one not so much. One of the things that kind of bother me about the sequels is, well, how they... I love this movie because it's a family that genuinely loves each other. And when you get to the sequels, it's basically about the family unit crumbling and falling apart to the point where in the third and final film, all you have is the Carol Ann character, because she's now living with her wealthy aunt and uncle in the big city, and because the family's all gone. It fell apart, and they can't raise her anymore, and they're no longer together. And I really dislike that, because I think that was basically a case of them wanting to do something different but keep the main character of Carol Ann, and they didn't want to have to pay Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So what you end up doing is something that basically kind of cheapens the original, because I love the way the family works in this movie. The Freelings is arguably my favorite movie family, and it just kind of gets ruined with the sequels. It's a case of where you went to the well so often, you basically destroyed the well. But yeah, I love this movie. I believe it's still one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. It's still, it doesn't scare me, but still entertains me. And then, oh man, Craig T. Nelson screaming at his boss is my favorite thing in this movie. You move the bodies! No. You move the headstones, but you left the bodies! Why? and the boss's eyes are going, oh my god!
Just
he's freaking out, and you have the... Oh, man, I would love to watch this with a room full of kids and see them freaking out, because you have the coffins just erupting out to the ground.
The velocity that they're getting shot out of the ground is amazing.
And they're just slamming into the windshield of the car, and the families inside the car, and they're all screaming.
Just drive away!
And Craig T. Nelson's looking for his keys, and he's checking his back pockets. He can't find the keys, and everyone's oh god, I love that movie so much.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Watch it again.
We got so many movies to still get through, and there's a couple that I'm like, man, I want to watch American Werewolf in London again.
I am always up for watching American Werewolf in London.
But I mean, there's no time, man. We got other things to watch. And the final one was Halloween, the 1978 film, for a couple of reasons. I've never seen this film from beginning to end in one sitting. I guess what I learned when we watched it was I have seen more of it than I thought I had. I know there was one night that it was on TV that I was watching like it and 2 other things at the same time, because I was just like trying to fall asleep and flipping channels. And obviously this is why I hate watching movies with commercials, because there's a commercial, I'll go watch something else for a little bit. Oh, now there's a commercial there, I'll go back to the other thing. Which is, I hate watching TV that way, but if I watch TV with commercials and late at night, I undoubtedly find myself doing that. So yeah, I'd watched more of it, and I didn't think that I had actually seen the conclusion, and I believe now that I actually had, so the conclusion wasn't a surprise to me. I, oddly enough, have seen the Rob Zombie remake from beginning to end in one sitting before, but had not seen the original. And then again, this is a movie that you like quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
So I've said before on the show that I'm not really a fan of John Carpenter. It seems like every time I watch a John Carpenter film that people hold in high regard, I don't have a high opinion of it. It's sitting 38% on my flick chart right now. I enjoyed it. I found it very... I think without Jamie Lee Curtis, there wouldn't be a lot to care about in the movie. Mm-hmm. I found it very, I guess by the numbers is the best description I can give of it.
Okay, the reason for that is because this movie was so influential.
Dude, I get that.
So many movies ripping it off over the last 40 years.
I get that. I totally understand that. And I am not a fan of this... I want to say I'm not a fan of this type of slasher movie, but this really is the proto version of it, because those movies started springing up after this movie. But like, I'm not a fan of the Friday the 13th series. I'm not a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I'm frankly not a fan of the Halloween series. But I've also seen almost none of those movies from beginning to end. I've just seen parts of them because it's just something I don't care about.
Okay. For myself, just to address that point.
Go ahead.
I like one Friday the 13th movie. And that's Friday the 13th Part 6, which I mentioned last week.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that.
All the rest of the movies are basically garbage, but that one I think is good because I think it's clever. It adds comedy, and it also adds homages to Universal monsters, and I think it did stuff in a very interesting, funny, clever way. Nightmare on Elm Street, I've only seen a few of them. I have not seen all. I think the original film is excellent. The second one's okay. I have not seen the Dream Warriors and the Dream Child, although those ones are fairly well liked. The other one that I like, though, the ones I really care about are the original film and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And the reason I like Wes Craven's New Nightmare is because he basically reinvented the franchise in that film. It ended up getting ignored.
Right.
But it was the original. That one was basically the prototype for Scream, in that it was meta, and it was actually addressing the genre and in a very intellectual way. Because the whole premise of that movie is, Wes Craven, Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, and John Saxon, they play themselves, and they're gonna do a new version of Nightmare on Elm Street, and they're getting together now because Wes Craven's got a new idea for a movie and a new take on it. And through the course of this, it starts coming out that, Freddy Krueger's actually real, but Freddy Krueger isn't what you thought he was from the original movies. It's actually this, like, demonic force from another dimension. The ending kind of doesn't quite stick the landing, but the whole premise and everything in that movie, I think, is extremely creative and, again, clever. So that's why I like those. And when it comes to Halloween, the only one I care about is the original film. The thing about Halloween is this is the first slasher movie, but it's not the first movie like that, because we have Psycho before.
Which, to its credit, I love Psycho. So.
Mm-hmm. And just Halloween came out in 78, and was it 74, I believe? We had Black Christmas. And there is quite a few things that Halloween does which is cribbed from Black Christmas. But this is the first, Halloween is the first of what we basically end up knowing as the slasher movie. And the thing that's brilliant about it is Carpenter went very Hitchcock-like in this film, where we don't really see any blood, or there's very little.
Very little.
There's no gushing blood everywhere. There's no gore. A large part of the violence actually happens off screen, and it's all about the atmosphere and tension. So this movie comes out in 78, and it was a big hit, and all of a sudden we end up with a whole bunch of imitators. The worst of which, or most infamous, is Friday the 13th, which came out in 1980 or 1981. And that was basically them trying to do Halloween without any charm and without any sense of what they were trying to do. It was basically they made trash, and you end up with like a movie with all like full of sex, blood, guts, gore, and just grotesque and offensive. But the Friday the 13th movies were basically famous in the 80s for being incredibly offensive movies.
Right. Which is why I always heard about them from my grade school friends, because they thought that kind of stuff, when I was in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, all my friends thought that was great. That they were these super offensive things.
When I was in junior high, it was the exact same thing, because when I was in junior high, I had friends that collected, back then, late 80s, they collected bubblegum cards that were horror movie stuff. and they loved all those movies, and I didn't really see any of the Friday the 13th movies until I was like high school age. And but yeah, Friday the 13th comes out, ends up being a big shocking surprise hit. So when it comes time that the studio wants to do Halloween 2, they get Carpenter to write the film, but they hire a different guy to direct it. And all of a sudden, all the skill, all the subtlety that was in the original film is no longer present, and because they're now trying to compete with Friday the 13th, so Halloween 2 is just blood and guts and gore and graphic violence, and the Friday the 13th movies end up basically, from that point on, becoming trash themselves. But
you mean the Halloween movies?
Yeah, the Halloween movies from that point on end up becoming trash themselves. But the original film, the 1978 film, it's the classiest slasher movies have ever been and will ever be. And I just think it's a genuinely good thriller.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid movie. I enjoyed it. It'll probably work its way into my regular Halloween movie watching. I'm honestly, part of the reason that I picked it up and so the two of us could watch it was, one, because I had not seen it all the way through before, and there is a level of, like, even though I'm not interested in these kind of movies, there is a level of interest in me where I go, this is an acclaimed movie that is loved for this number of reasons. I should see it at least once, you know. And also, quite frankly, the new movie that's coming out looks interesting to me, so I might go see it, so I wanted to be prepared. You know, it's the first one that I can actually say, like, when I started seeing trailers for it, I went, oh, I might actually want to see that. That looks interesting.
I'm very curious about seeing the new film too.
I should say, I don't hate the zombie remake, but it is a completely different movie. It is a more of a study of a serial killer and really getting it. What it does is completely opposite of this film. It really wants to get into the motivations of everybody involved, whereas this movie does not get into motivations in any way, shape, or form.
Right. My understanding is that Carpenter wanted to do a horror movie where you don't understand the killer, and the killer is an unknowable entity. So we are forced to not identify with Michael Myers, because we only get like one brief glimpse of what he looks like under the mask. Most of it we're just seeing through his eyes, or at least through the holes, the eye holes of the mask.
Right.
And so yeah, they're trying to do two very different things. The other thing is that the Rob Zombie remake was also trying to condense a lot of story beats that came from the sequels, or more specifically the Halloween 2 from 1982, I believe. Because here's the thing, I've seen Halloween 1978 a lot of times, and I always forget that the big shocking reveal that's in Halloween 2 is not in this film. It's not even present. It's a retcon. Mm-hmm. Because if you go into this movie assuming what is revealed in the second film, this movie has way too many coincidences for it to be remotely logical. And my understanding is that the new sequel ignores the second film and all the other sequels, and therefore ignores the big retcon reveal from Halloween 2, which means that, to me, it's that much more fascinating, and I'm really excited about seeing the new film. Well, maybe excited might be a bit too much of a word, too strong of a word, but I am very interested in seeing it, just because all that baggage is supposed to be gone. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Halloween 1978, I love it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So
second favorite Carpenter film.
I think it's going to end up being my second favorite Carpenter film, although I haven't fairly ranked They Live, because I've not seen it in a very long time, but that's going to probably be up there. So
I haven't seen They Live since I was in high school, so I kind of underrank it.
Yeah, it's probably about 20 years since I've seen it, but
it's been at least 25 for me. I want to get it on Blu-ray, but it's so expensive.
Yeah, it is. Every Halloween I go, I should get that, and then I go, oh wait, that's why I don't have that.
Oh yeah, it's $30. Let's go. Oh,
All right, well that gets us through everything we've been doing in no short order. Um,
We went long.
luckily, we don't have that much to talk about in the news, so we will be right back with the news. And the news quickly. Our first story is CW has released their first image of Ruby Rocks as Batwoman, and it's my new phone wallpaper. I'll just throw. That's my opinion of it.
I like it.
It's great, dude. It's as I said on social media, wholly perfect costume, Batwoman.
Yeah, my only thing is I wish the cape was longer and red. And I wish the red on her symbol was like blood red.
Yeah, it's sort of a dark red.
Really, it's muted. I wish they really played up the blood vampire red of the symbol and the cape. But the silhouette's all there, and it looks like Batwoman.
The red hair's there, the pale skin's there, the blood red lips are there.
Yeah, it's as close as we were going to get.
It's almost comic book perfect.
Right. It's as close as we were going to get with the kind of styling they do with the extra padding. And
I'm actually way surprised that it's this accurate.
Yeah, I am stunned. Because I thought we were going to end up with like much more body armor on them.
No, I did too. It's also funny to me that her utility belt is slouched to the one hip, like Yvonne Craig's back in Batman '66. That it's not actually on her waist.
That's true.
Because we got to girl it up a little bit, I guess. But no, she looks great. I cannot wait to see her in action. Netflix has canceled Iron Fist after 2 seasons. So didn't Iron Fist season 2 just come out like within the last month or so?
Less than a month, I think. And here's the thing. It's been getting better press and reviews than season 1, but I was actually surprised when I started looking up the rankings.
Came out in September.
And finding out that, yeah, it's getting better reviews than season 1, but it's still not great reviews.
Right. I know our friend Malcolm said he liked it up until the end, and then he said the end ruined it for him.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's... I think on Rotten... I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe on Rotten Tomatoes it has a general score of less than 50.
Mm-hmm.
But it's supposed to be something like 33 points higher than season 1.
Whoa.
So it's getting better reviews, but it's not getting great reviews anyways.
Alice Eve played Typhoid Mary in this?
Yeah, I saw that the other day. I was surprised. I don't even know what she looks like in the show.
No, I don't either. So, yeah, I have not watched any of Iron Fist. I've only seen him in Defenders because of the fact that I have not really stayed caught up with these shows. It just seems weird to me that the series came out just over a month ago, or the second season came out just over a month ago, and there's not ratings because it's Netflix, but I'm sure they're looking at it, okay, this many people watched it in this amount of time, and that makes it this successful.
Yeah, they have to rank or follow downloads or views or whatever. The thing about this is this doesn't even necessarily mean it's the end for Iron Fist.
No, not at all.
To me, what they should do is just bring Iron Fist and some of the other characters that are in this. Like, I believe they introduced Colleen Wing.
I think she was in it from the beginning, so.
Right, and the Daughters of the Dragon with Misty... Oh, I just forgot her last name. You know, Colleen Wing and Misty...
Misty Knight?
Misty Knight.
Misty Knight was on... she's in this, but she was on Defenders. We see her get her arm ripped off in Defenders.
Well, the thing I'm trying to say is, it's Luke Cage. Just put him in season 3 if you're gonna do it of Luke... it's Iron Fist. Just put him in season 3 of Luke Cage.
Right.
Combine him into that show, and then you end up giving us Power Man and Iron Fist, heroes for hire. It's there. Streamline it.
No, I agree.
Just keep the showrunner from the Luke Cage show, because apparently they know what they're doing, apparently.
Yeah, it seems like it. Our final story. Sweet revenge. And we get to talk about James Gunn again. James Gunn is in negotiations with Warner Brothers to write Suicide Squad 2 and presumably direct it. I'm also hearing stories of a bunch of actors, although I didn't get any names, saying, "Oh, if he's going to do that, I'll sign up for that."
I've seen that Dave Bautista tweeted saying, "Sign me up."
Yeah.
And
he should take over. No, Dave Bautista is the KG Beast. Although I guess KG Beast is technically already in the DCEU.
The first thing, okay, that's kind of cool, but well,
yeah, he could be the NKV demon. So
I would have said Bane.
Oh yeah, he'd be good for Bane. I was trying to avoid saying Killer Croc. So.
But no, him as Bane would be awesome. Yeah, when I heard this, the first thing I went with, like, oh my god, this could actually save the Suicide Squad.
Right.
And possibly help save the DCU.
If Aquaman doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Because Aquaman looks good.
Aquaman looks good. Shazam looks good. Wonder Woman 1984 looks good.
She's gonna fight the commies.
1980s parachute pants and oh god.
Can we get I don't remember exactly when the song came out, but can we get a sequence of her fighting Russians till We Got the Beat?
For some reason I thought you were gonna say Walking on Sunshine.
That's just because I reference Futurama all the time.
No, I'm actually excited about this. I'm hoping Gunn does sign on and that this actually happens and he ends up writing and directing Suicide Squad 2. Yeah, I think this is really, really cool.
Yeah, there's really not a lot to say about it, but it's an interesting development.
I saw one of my friends made a point that it was funny that Suicide Squad was obviously written as to try to, in a way to try to ape Guardians of the Galaxy, and basically that the first Suicide Squad movie was basically a ripoff of Guardians of the Galaxy, and the idea that Warner's would end up getting the guy that they were trying to rip off to take over the franchise is just incredible.
While we're on this subject, what's kind of funny is the first appearance of Adam Warlock has been trending pretty high because they set him up in Guardians 2 that he would be in Guardians 3. But since the James Gunn thing broke, it's kind of the bottom's kind of come out of that speculator market on that issue because no one thinks no one thinks the movie's actually going to get made now, or if it does, it's not going to get made with the script that was originally set up. So.
Oh yeah, it'll probably end up being something really stupid. It's kind of dumb for me to say this because Marvel generally has a good track record in it, but I don't know, Guardians 3 without James Gunn just seems like a recipe for disaster to me, or that we're going to end up with something like Thor: The Dark World, where it's just, yeah, it's okay, it's got some good character stuff, or some funny moments, but generally, on a whole, it doesn't quite work. Or Iron Man 3, where it's just a mess.
Right. All right, well, that's actually the news, so we're done with that. I told you it'd be quick. Quickly want to say about Galactic Gregs, glad everyone's enjoying the new layout. Thank you to everybody who came out to Walking Dead Day, as we were recording, was yesterday. But don't forget, on the 27th and 28th, we have our annual Halloween fall sale, as well as Halloween Comic Fest is the 27th, that Saturday. So come check us out for that. 1407 East Lincoln Way in Valparaiso, Indiana. Come on in. And on to the main topic of the week. And it's a topic I've wanted to do for some time. It was, as I said before, on my short list of topics to cover when we created this podcast. And that is the 1984 movie Ghostbusters. Written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, and directed by Ivan Reitman. We won't bury the lead here. We both love this movie, I think.
Yeah.
So in case you've been living under a rock, here's the plot. Parapsychologists Peter Venkman, Raymond Stantz, and Egon Spengler are scientists working at Columbia University who have a fascination with the paranormal. After they lose their jobs because of a botched ghost investigation in the university library, that's not accurate. This was plot courtesy of Wikipedia. They go to the New York Public Library. They established Ghostbusters, a paranormal investigation and elimination service. They develop high-tech equipment to capture ghosts and open their business in a disused firehouse. In their first outing, Egon warns them never to cross the energy streams of their proton pack weapons, as they could cause a catastrophic explosion. They capture their first ghost, Slimer, and deposit it in a specially built containment unit in the firehouse basement. As paranormal activity increases in New York City, they hire a fourth member, Winston Zeddemore, to cope with demand. The Ghostbusters are retained by cellist Dana Barrett, whose apartment is haunted by the demonic spirit Zool, a demigod worshipped as a servant of Gozer the Gozerian, a shape-shifting god of destruction. Venkman competes with Dana's neighbor, accountant Louis Tully, for her affections. As the Ghostbusters investigate, Dana is possessed by Zool, which declares itself the Gatekeeper, as Louis is possessed by a similar demon, Vince Clortho, the Keymaster. Both demons speak of the coming of Gozer and the release of the imprisoned ghosts, and the Ghostbusters take steps to keep the two apart. Walter Peck, a lawyer representing the Environmental Protection Agency, has the Ghostbusters arrested for operating as unlicensed waste handlers and orders their ghost containment system deactivated, causing an explosion that releases all the ghosts and Louis Vins. The ghosts wreak havoc throughout the city, while Louis Vins advances toward Dana Zool's apartment. Consulting blueprints of Dana's apartment building, the Ghostbusters learn that the Mad Doctor and cult leader Ivo Shandor, declaring humanity too sick to exist after World War I, designed the building as a gateway to summon Gozer and bring about the end of the world. The Ghostbusters are released from custody to combat the supernatural crisis. On the apartment building roof, Zool and Vins open the gate between dimensions and transform into supernatural hellhounds. Gozer, in the form of a woman, is subdued by the team. It disappears, but its voice echoes that the Destructor will follow a form chosen by the team. Ray inadvertently recalls a beloved corporate mascot from his childhood, and the Destructor arrives as the giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that attacks the city. Going against Egon's earlier warnings, the Ghostbusters cross the proton energy streams and fire them at Gozer's portal in an attempt to reverse the particle flow. The resulting explosion closes the gate, destroys Stay Puft/Gozer, and frees Dana and Louis. The Ghostbusters are welcomed on the streets as heroes. I don't know why it has it being at the university library. It was Ray clearly says the New York Public Library in the film. I expect better of Wikipedia.
Thing with Wikipedia is wait 15 minutes and the article could be completely different.
Yep. So we'll do the old when we first saw it bit. And Derek, when did you first see this?
I actually don't remember the first time I seen this movie. I am presuming around 86 or 87 when we first got our original VCR.
Uh-huh.
Because I do distinctly remember... Okay, the earliest I remember actually seeing the movie was... I think it was 11. And this was back before my parents put on an addition to our house and we ended up with a new family room. This was whenever the family room was in the basement. And I distinctly recall watching the movie starting with my parents watching it, my older sister. I can't remember if my younger siblings were there. And me being aware of how the movie was going to start and watching it from the stairwell, where our stairwell in the basement was a very simple wooden stairwell, and I was on the stairs and looking through and hiding my face behind the spokes for the rail.
Okay.
Because I was aware of what was coming up with the ghost in the library, and it terrified the heck out of me when I was a kid. And I'm presuming that's because I had seen it before, but it might also be that either myself or my older sister had a book that we got from Scholastic, which was a recounting of the film with each page was like a big, giant, glossy photo from it.
I totally have that book from Scholastic. I might still have that book from Scholastic, but I definitely had it.
Yeah, we had it. That book is long gone. That's like 25 years. I have no idea what the heck ever happened to it. But it scared me when I was a kid because I had that one big giant page of the ghost. And so it's quite possible that I knew that ghost was coming in that scene because I had read that book so many times. And that this example I'm giving when I was like 10 or 11 was actually the first time I saw the movie. The funny thing about that is I don't think I saw the movie again until I was in junior high. So like 2 years later, maybe a year later, maybe 2 years. The thing about this movie is the most conservative estimate I can give for how many times I've seen this movie is 50. There is no way I've seen it less than 50 times.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, and I could, if you told me 100, I could believe it.
Yeah. If you told me that I actually saw it more than 100 times, I would not surprise me. I want to say it's somewhere between 50 and 100.
So, real quickly, I'm probably a similar time seeing it as you. I did not see it in the original theatrical run. There's a weird period where we went to the movies all the time as kids in the late 70s, early 80s, and then again starting probably around the time of Back to the Future 2. And then that got me to the point where like I see everything in the theater now, you know. But there was this weird period in the mid 80s where like my mom never took us to the movies, and my dad did, and for some reason didn't in this period. So Ghostbusters, the first time I saw it was on TV. So I'm guessing 86. The funny thing about that is we recorded it off TV, and the version that I watched so many times until I got it on DVD was the copy that I made from TV, which actually shocked me when I watched the movie on DVD because I had not seen it with any of the swearing or anything. It was 1986 censored television version that I'd been watching for years and had memorized, and then some lines were creeping in, and I'm like, whoa, I don't remember that. It's just funny because that's the way I always saw it, you know.
It's weird for me because I have talked in the past about how often we used to visit my grandparents across the border, and I used to watch so many movies on HBO, and I have to believe that Ghostbusters aired on HBO in the mid-'80s.
You would think.
But I have no memory of ever seeing it on HBO. But I must have.
So my younger brother and I, used to do this thing in the summer when we were out of school, and it continued basically into our 20s until he moved out, where at night, because we didn't have school the next day and we could stay up late, we would essentially watch 2 to 3 movies every night. And we did that like every summer through high school, through college, and then once we were both out of college, but before we had moved out, basically did it every night at that point, you know, until we got real jobs, you know. So Ghostbusters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, both Conan's, both the second Ghostbusters, Temple of Doom, Star Wars, we watch them all the time because when you're watching 3 movies a night, even if you're watching other things that are a little more obscure or what, you know, like we watched Gremlins all the time, we watched weird movies like Beastmaster was one of the ones we watched all the time, you know, that I've seen Beastmaster probably 30-40 times. You know,
I don't think I've seen it that many times, but it was one that I used to love watching when I was growing up.
You know, even with watching Star Wars over and over, and Godzilla films over and over, and Gamera films over and over, you know, like the ones we gravitated toward the most were the Indiana Jones films, the Star Wars films, the Back to the Future films, and the Ghostbusters films. So, like, that's how I know I've seen it a ton, because there was probably some summers where I watched it 4 to 5 times in a summer, you know. Just because we would cycle through the tapes, the movies we'd have on tape, and go, oh, okay, well, we're through everything. All right, let's start over, you know?
Yeah, the thing with Ghostbusters is by the time I get to junior high, I have this old little black and white television that my parents had back in the 70s that they let me have, and I'm watching. I had rabbit ears on that, and I was able to get the Ottawa and Montreal CTV stations, and they would air movies every night, every day, and after midnight, and I watched movies all the time that way when I was in junior high, and Ghostbusters would pop up in late night TV quite frequently, or in primetime re-airings throughout the 90s. And every time it was on television, I'd end up watching it, which is funny because in the early to mid 90s, I ended up actually getting it on VHS, and then Ghostbusters ended up being one of the first DVDs I ever got, and I've had it on Blu-ray for a few years now.
Yeah, I bought it 3 times on disc. I bought it on DVD. I bought the special edition anniversary DVD when it came out, and I bought the Blu-ray version of that when it was released on Blu-ray.
Yeah, I've owned it on VHS. I got it one Christmas as a gift on DVD, and then I bought the Blu-ray myself. And so I've owned it on 3 different video formats. And so it's a movie that I have watched a lot over the years. And the thing is also, I'm a kid in the 80s, and the real Ghostbusters cartoon debuts, and I watched that all the time.
No, yeah, so did I.
That was one of my favorite cartoons, at least the first couple of years before it got retooled as Slimer in the real Ghostbusters and became much more of a comedy. Because that was such a great cartoon, because it was genuinely creepy and scary. When you're a kid, because the Boogeyman and...
Yeah, the Boogeyman and Sam Hain episodes particularly.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I was all about Ghostbusters, even whether or not I was watching the movie whenever the cartoon started or not.
Right. Yeah, and like, when did the cartoon start? Because I would have seen...
I think 86.
So I would have seen the movie by then, because I didn't go into the cartoon not knowing what it was,
It's weird. Yeah, because... Yeah, I mentioned that Scholastic Ghostbusters book, but the thing is, my sister had similar ones for Temple of Doom, I believe Gremlins, and Thriller, and all 4 of them kind of terrified me, those books, when I was a kid, the picture books. Yeah, it's funny when you think about it, how big Thriller was, that it got a book like all these other major movies.
I remember going to a neighbor's house to watch Thriller because they had the store-bought VHS, and they weren't really showing the video on MTV because they wanted you to go out and buy this big store-bought VHS. This is how I remember it. I could be completely wrong about this. And I remember going to a neighbor's house to watch it.
Yeah, it was shockingly long for a music video of that time. Yeah, people forget how much of an impact that was when it came out.
I just found the Scholastic book on eBay, so that's cool.
What, Ghostbusters or Thriller?
Ghostbusters.
I kind of want the Thriller one.
Ghostbusters storybook, Scholastic, 1984.
I'm going to try looking those up because I want to see if they look like how I remember.
You know what I had that was great was the Ghostbusters board game.
Oh, I didn't know that existed.
Which was a... it's a remake of another board game, but they just basically reskinned it with Ghostbusters stuff.
Oh god, I can't believe I forgot this. I just remembered it. Okay, my mom.
Which? It was a retool of which?
My mother, as a school teacher, she used to spend a lot of money buying decorations and stuff for her classroom, because my mom loved decorating her class each month with a different theme, although there were a couple of months where she would do 2 themes in that month. Like it would be like autumn stuff for October, but then all of a sudden middle of the month, boom, it's all Halloween stuff. And so I think it was summer '84, Ghostbusters is in theaters, and I remember going into the kitchen one night, and my mom would buy stuff in that, to hang on the walls and everything like that, for all the different themes, but she would also create her own stuff, draw them out on Bristol board, color them all herself, and laminate them. I remember summer of '84 going into the kitchen and one night, and my mom has a clipping from a newspaper ad for the movie Ghostbusters, and she was replicating on this huge Bristol board sheet, the Ghostbusters symbol, just drawing it off from eye on that, and then coloring it, and that every October that would hang up in the window on the outside in the hall of her classroom. I think that might actually be the earliest that I'm aware that I can remember something related to Ghostbusters.
I found a couple copies of the board game on eBay, going for like $50 to $60.
Oh, this episode's just going to turn to you and me just looking stuff up on
The thing is, I'm pretty sure I have it still in the crawl space, but...
Oh my god, I hope it did not get damaged.
Well, I don't know what condition it's in, because, I mean, it was beat up before I put it in the crawl space, because we used it, we played it so much. So I have no idea what condition it's in.
Yeah, in case people are wondering, you had a flood in part of that crawl space.
Right.
So, yeah, I would hope that it's in okay condition.
But,
I had so many cool things growing up as a kid, toys and books and stuff, that I wish we had kept. Like, I had, like, these big, thick volumes collecting all the collected works of Dr. Seuss.
Mm-hmm.
And, these are things that we had whenever, back in the 70s. Oh, boy. But yeah,
okay.
Ghostbusters.
So, let's get on to the characters, as we are wont to do when we review movies. And we'll start with Dr. Peter Venkman. Obviously, Peter's an easy one to say is your favorite character in the movie, because most people would probably say that. It's Bill Murray. He's hilarious. Is this his best role? I think it's his best role. It's the thing that I think of him first for. The most apt thing about Peter Venkman is when Dana Barrett says that he's more like a game show host.
I love that line because it was an ad-lib by Sigourney Weaver, because the script said you're more like a used car salesman, which is such a cliche.
Right.
But the game show host, that is such a great... Yeah, because it's all this false sincerity, and he's got this, like, con man air.
Yeah, and he actually is a doctor. He's actually trained in parapsychology, but he's also kind of like, out of the group, he's the trying to get rich quick type guy.
Okay, we have two comments in the film that perfectly surmise the character. One is the game show host comment by Dana, but the other one is by Dean Winters, when he says that you seem to view science as a shill, as a con. And both of those are exactly what Peter is, which makes it kind of cool whenever, as the movie progresses, and he starts to see it's actually real.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts actually doing science stuff as time goes on, to the point where, once they're in the prison cell or jail, and they're having a big discussion, and he contributes something, and then he just sneers at Ray.
No study.
Peter's an interesting character because he is really, on the face of it, he's a completely unlikable jerk.
No, that's what makes this Bill Murray's best performance, I think, because the character, you shouldn't like the character. The character is such an unlikable jerk that you shouldn't like him, but you somehow do.
Yeah, it's
and he does, like, when the chips are down, he does basically become a genuinely heroic character. He does, yes, he's just kind of like after Dana at the beginning, but he does genuinely care for Dana and is trying to protect her. Right. He does genuinely care for the other guys and is trying to hold everything together, but he's also smarmy jerk throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, we even have elements where he's almost fatherly to Ray.
Right.
And yeah, it's a fascinating character. This is a character who is got a lot of depth for a goofball horror comedy from 1984. Yeah, it's all tribute to Bill Murray, because I can't imagine anyone else being able to play this character.
Right, it is a layered performance by Murray for sure.
Yeah, oh god, he's almost Pan-like at times. Like, I just love the image after, whenever we see Dana and her musician friend walking across the promenade, and then you just see him kind of like hop, skipping, with the one leg sticking up.
Yeah.
And just out of nowhere, he's like this like agent of mischief.
Yeah, and Dana gets won over by him too.
Right.
Like that helps you liking him, is that Dana ends up liking him.
Yeah, he's like an imp or a naughty child.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a jerk, but there's not really.
He's not a malicious jerk.
Right. The closest we
get. He's a playful jerk.
Right. He's a playful jerk. The closest we get to malicious is in the opening scene where.
He's shocking the guy.
He's literally shocking the guy just to try to make it with the college girl, and the guy's actually improving and getting better. And
yeah.
She's an idiot, frankly. That's the closest.
Well, yeah, and like essentially his theory is correct because the guy is. If you watch the cards, he's getting close, and he's within like 2 on a lot of them, or within 1 on a lot of them.
She's just way off.
And so it's basically proving the point that he came up with to do this experiment, but he's so enamored with this co-ed that he's not even paying attention to it.
Right. The science becomes secondary. The funny thing is, I remember being in high school and coming to making the point and saying that one thing I found funny about that scene is that girl for the rest of her life after that point told everyone she met, I'm psychic.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because she's completely convinced that she's psychic just because of the baloney that she's been fed by Venkman trying to get her in the sack. It's funny. Oh my god, yeah. It's like that is the worse Venkman is in the film, and it's like the character establishing moment. It's like that's how far he'll go, but he never goes that far again.
Right.
Yeah, because like I said, him on the little skipping jump that he does, or hop that he's doing, but then the scene where he then leaves it's my favorite Peter Venkman moment in the film is when he then leaves Dana and the musician, and he's doing the I hope you're feeling better, sir. Exaggerate, and then he starts. Because you see the guy on the roller skates, and then Peter just starts spinning in the long shot.
Right.
That him spinning as he's walking away is my favorite.
I have to think. I've never read this or anything, but I have to think that's an ad lib from.
Oh, it has to be.
Murray.
Yeah, it's just he's never not entertaining in this movie.
Right. After Peter, we have got Dr. Ray Stantz. Aykroyd plays him in this sort of like childlike wonder all the time. Which is kind of funny because he's also constantly smoking throughout the film, at least the first film.
He's the guy who gets a blowjob from a ghost.
Yeah. Which was also not in the TV version that I had.
Yeah, I remember being shocked seeing that when I was a kid. Like, oh my, what's the ghost do? Oh my goodness! It was like one of the first.
And I mean, I guess it's good enough place to get into it. That was a whole extra sequence that was filmed and then excised from the film, and then they incorporated it as a dream sequence just so they could use some of the footage. Mm-hmm. Where they were like staying the night at a haunted castle or something like that in upstate New York. That's why he's dressed like a colonial army soldier or something like that, or colonial general or something like that.
Yeah, I'd imagine they would have wanted to use at least part of it because they completed special effects for that scene.
Right. But yeah, Ray's the one where he's like, hey, it's a firehouse. Hey, there's a sledding pole. Hey, yeah. I got this cool car with the blaring siren. He's a big kid. He's also the one that believes in what they're doing the most.
Oh, yeah.
And might be the actually smartest. I mean, I know Egon's the smart one, but Ray might be like the most overall knowledgeable one about the paranormal.
Yeah, Ray's also the character who has, ever since the movie came out, has been called the heart of the Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. It was Egon was the brain of the Ghostbusters. Ray was the heart, and I can't remember what the suggestion for Peter and Winston were. I want to say humor for Peter, but or maybe the mouth. I can't remember. But yeah, Ray is definitely the heart of the team. It's kind of funny because Ray is actually probably my favorite of the 4 Ghostbusters. At least he was when I was a kid. And I think that still kind of continues. Part of that is because Dan Aykroyd was one of my favorites when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And he remains like one of my all-time favorite Saturday Night Live guys. And I think he is my favorite of the Ghostbusters because he's so fun. We have Peter, who's the imp, and we have Ray, who's the child. This like exuberance in that. But yeah, but he's smoking all the time too.
Yeah, and I don't know, like Ray's just fun. Like he'll spew technobabble, but then be like super excited by the stupidest things.
Oh yeah, and he's also in a lot of ways he's the I don't want to say facilitator, but he is the one who initiates a lot of the stuff. What I mean by that is they end up getting the firehouse just because Ray's excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they get he's the one who brings the old ambulance as the team car. And then he's the one who ends up creating the destroyer at the climax. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie happens because of Ray.
Yeah, I was just quickly reading his Wikipedia page. Yeah, pointing out that like he has a detailed knowledge of the Bible, but yet is an agnostic. Like he's into this thing, you know.
He's in deep.
Right. After Ray, we have Dr. Egon Spengler. My favorite thing about Egon has always been Harold Ramis says on the audio commentary for, I believe it's Ghostbusters, it might be Ghostbusters 2, that he had sat his kids down when his kids were like 10 to 12, something like that, to make them watch the films. And one of his kids said, "Wow, Dad, you're a really good scientist."
I think people forget how funny Harold Ramis is as Egon.
Yeah.
Because he's got a lot of really great moments.
Well, because he's kind of a Spock-like character, or at least that's what they're kind of going for. Well, is, the logical, the cold, logical intellectual. But yes, you're right. He's got a lot of funny moments.
Because we got the whole beat whenever we're introduced to the character, and he's listening to the table as if the table's haunted or something, and Peter's doing and Egon's like getting into it, like he thinks, and then Peter makes the comment, "This is like the time where you try to drill a hole in your own head," and Egon is angry. It says that would have worked if you didn't stop me.
A lot of his humor is deadpan, but then at the same time, like when he's showing when he's doing the thing with his fingers to let Peter know how much money to ask for when they're in the Sedgwick, that's great.
What's great about that is, you get the impression that Egon is a guy who spends most of the time in his own head in intellectual pursuits, but he's also crafty.
Right.
He is in that moment. He is partners with Peter in this kind of a con.
Right.
And if anything, he's the one pushing Peter on how far to go.
Right. And it's subtle.
And it's all subtle. I never noticed that myself until we watched it this past week.
Really?
I've seen it like 50 times.
Really?
Okay. It never dawned on me what he was doing.
I was
aware that he was doing something, but it never dawned on me what he was doing.
I never caught it until I saw it in the theater probably 6 years ago on a re-release, because I've seen it a couple times in the theater now. But yeah, I didn't realize you just realized that this time. I know you brought it up, but I mean, again, I've watched it since 1985, 6, whatever, so many times, and I didn't realize it until about 6 years ago. So, right. But yeah, it's super subtle.
To me, that just proves the depth of this movie and how much there is. I mean, it's a film that I've seen, as I've said, anywhere from 50 to 100, if not more times, and I discovered something new that layers the performances and the characters that much more.
Right.
Just this last week.
I mean, and then you also have the, like probably his most laugh out loud moment, I guess I'd say, is the like when Peck is saying, these men are in violation of the Environmental Protection Act, and this explosion is a direct result of it. And he's, your mother.
Yeah, see, that's what's great is because that beat is, you would expect it would be Peter or even Ray or Winston, one of the others, to react like that. It's Egon that loses it.
Right. Yeah, it's Egon that loses his cool, and he is the logical guy the whole movie.
Yeah, he's the logical guy, but he has all this other depth where he will play part of Peter's cons, if not lead on those cons. But he's also a guy who, if you push him, he will blow his stack.
Right.
Yeah, I think... See, that's the thing is, these three characters are so layered and multidimensional, and that's what makes them and their interplay so fun.
Then you have Winston Zeddemore. Unfortunately, the least fleshed out of any of the main characters of the main Ghostbusters.
Or any of the characters.
Oh yeah, really any of the characters.
Really, I think the only one that's not as fleshed out is Janine.
Yeah, you get more out of Winston in the sequel, but I also feel like a lot of the stuff, and we'll talk about this next week, but a lot of the stuff that they do with him in the sequel was simply to give him something to do.
Right.
To involve him more. There's supposedly backstory where he's a former Marine and he was in the engineering corps, and he has some level of
yeah, he's supposed to have a master's in engineering.
Right. So there is some level of him being qualified to do this. There's also, I believe in the Ghostbusters video game, which essentially serves as Ghostbusters 3, that it's mentioned that he has gotten his degree in parapsychology. So that he actually continued further education after joining the Ghostbusters. Here he's kind of, I guess he's the muscle.
He's essentially the muscle, and he's almost a straight man to kind of compare and contrast the ridiculousness of the other characters.
Right, and he's definitely supposed to be like the blue collar guy.
Yeah, it's really a thankless role.
It is, especially in this movie. It's a character that's much better served in the animated series, which Ernie Hudson famously tried out for and was told he didn't sound enough like the character.
Oh god, yeah, I remember. I think it's Arsenio Hall.
Yeah, it's Arsenio Hall gets the part.
Which is crazy because Peter was completely rewritten for the cartoon.
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
he ends up being the dumb guy.
It's sort of like a bad interpretation of what he is in the movie, but
yeah, if you ignore the fact that he's actually really clever, and the big issue with Peter is that he doesn't give any of the stuff, even the stuff that they're doing, whenever they start doing it, any real respect.
Mm-hmm.
He treats it all as basically a joke until the things start happening, and then he starts actually getting on board. And the thing with Winston is, yeah, he's very much just a straight man up to that point, but we do still get to have some cool moments now with Ernie Hudson, and some funny moments like the whole I've seen things that would turn your skin white.
Yeah. Or tell him about the Twinkie.
Right. And also the interesting sober discussion between him and Ray in the car when they're talking about the...
that's what I think of when I think of Winston, is that scene. And that's his most fleshed out scene in the movie.
Yeah, that's the one that really kind of pushes the idea that, there's a lot more depth to this character than we basically get in the rest of the movie.
Right. Yeah, he has a couple of really funny moments as straight man. The ones we mentioned, when he's like, I want to make a phone call. I wasn't even there.
His introductory scene is great too, where Janine's listening off. Do you believe in the theory of Atlantis, the Ghostbusters, blah 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 blah? And he says, and he replies, "If there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe in anything you tell me." And I love that moment. That's the funny thing. A large part of this is probably flavored by my loving the real Ghostbusters so much when I was a kid, and also Dan Aykroyd. But my favorite Ghostbusters when I was growing up were Ray and Winston. They were my two favorites. In the movie, it was much more Ray. In the cartoon, it was much more Winston. Because I really liked Winston.
Well, like I said, he's kind of the muscle here, and I seem to remember in the real Ghostbusters, he kind of ends up the action guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're all the smart. Egon's the smart guy, but Egon and Ray are the smart guys, and Peter's kind of the clever guy, and he still maintains the con artist type thing. But yeah, Winston's the action guy on the cartoon.
The thing is, I think Winston's also incredibly savvy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think he's the savviest out of the four. But yeah, we'll get more into it whenever we get to Ghostbusters 2. I hope I remember. But I mean, that movie even stresses that where we get moments in Ghostbusters 2 where Winston is now fully a member and is completely on board with the lunacy of Egon and Ray, and he, even more than Peter in Ghostbusters 2, talks on their level.
Yeah.
You know, we get the moment, you know, they're all in the three of them are having a discussion, and Peter starts giving them, you know, stop embarrassing us in front of the normals.
Yeah.
And then he's with them whenever they're running around and ranting and that in the long underwear.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into all that.
It's just such a shame that we don't really get that in this film. And everything I've ever read is that all of that was in the screenplay. But once they couldn't get Eddie Murphy because he wasn't able to do it, the role was written for Eddie Murphy, and he was supposed to be in almost as much of the movie as the other guys.
Yeah, he wasn't even supposed to join later, I don't believe. I think he was supposed to be one member right out the gate.
And yeah, and it was written for him by Dan Aykroyd because they had worked together on Trading Places, but then he wasn't able to do it because he was filming Beverly Hills Cop at the time. And then, but they got Ernie Hudson, and to his credit, I think he's great in the role. I think he's funny.
He's also the...
really
go ahead.
They end up exercising most of the character from the final screenplay in the film.
He's also subtly in the movies and blatantly in the cartoon the car guy.
Oh, yeah.
He does all the mechanical work on the Ecto 1. He drives the Ecto 1 more than anybody else in the movies.
Yeah, it's basically he ends up becoming the partner in crime to Ray.
Yeah. So this is from Wikipedia. In the original script for Ghostbusters, Winston Zeddemore is intended to be part of the Ghostbusters team from the beginning. A former Air Force major, a demolitions expert. He is revised in subsequent drafts after Hudson was cast. His character was originally intended to represent the audience, but rewritten as the outsider and a late addition to the Ghostbusters team. After working with him on the previous year on Trading Places, Dan Aykroyd originally wanted Eddie Murphy to play the role of Winston. Aware of his comic abilities, the characterization of Winston would have been in a semi-improvisational style, similar to Bill Murray's performance as Peter Venkman. Murphy was too busy shooting Beverly Hills Cop to commit.
Yeah, I guess that all of it says that Venkman doing the spin was completely improvised. Man, I love that moment. that might be one of my favorite moments in the movie. It's such a throwaway thing.
So that's the four Ghostbusters. The remaining characters to talk about is Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett. It has to be my second favorite Sigourney Weaver role because there only can be one role as my favorite Sigourney Weaver role. But she, for her being what she is in the Alien franchise, she's completely different here. She's like genuinely, I don't want to say the sex pot because that's not accurate, but she's like much more of the, attractive woman here than she is in, not that she's not attractive in Aliens. Part of what makes her great in Aliens is that she's, still a feminine woman who is also a badass action hero. But she's just like cute in this movie. That's as far as I guess the best description I can give it is
she's very glamorous in this.
Yeah.
And sophisticated. She is, she's, it sounds stupid to say this, but she's the uptown girl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When they do the sequence in the middle of the film where it's just the music video montage of them out busting ghosts and all the news stories, we keep seeing her in her apartment watching the news, and it's like she's doing aerobics, she's stringing her cello, it's like she's doing all these, fun girl things that she's out being, an independent woman in the city,
Thing about her that differentiates her is she's still on par with the Ghostbusters, because that's the thing that's funny about this movie is everyone is basically an intellectual.
Well, what makes Dana a great pairing for Peter is the fact that she fires right back at him all the time.
Oh yeah. What I'm trying to get at is with like Egon and Ray, they're intellectuals, but she's different in that she's cultured.
Right.
But we also get glimpses of her being, as you said, a regular girl.
Right.
In the 80s, because, she's doing aerobics, she's got stuff like that, and she's also someone who buys soda pop and marshmallows and junk food.
Mm-hmm.
So she's cultured. She's a musician and in orchestra, and then in the next film she's an art restorer. So she has to be highly educated, but she's also a regular girl. I don't know. I love Sigourney Weaver. This might be my third favorite Sigourney Weaver character.
Wow, she's 35 in this. I would have thought she was a little bit younger in this, but
it works out.
No, it works out, but I don't know. I would have thought she would have been a little bit younger.
Yeah, because I think she was like 27 or so, 28
in Alien.
Alien.
In the first Alien. Yeah. You're right. You're right.
But Ellen Ripley is my favorite Sigourney Weaver character. Dana is my third. My second favorite is actually Gwen DeMarco from Galaxy Quest.
She's right up there, but I think I like Dana better. So
I like Dana a lot, but Gwen I like a little more just because I think she's funnier. Although Dana is funny, but in a very droll way. She doesn't get the laugh out loud jokes. It's like I think they cast Sigourney Weaver, but they weren't sure how funny she could be.
Yeah.
And later movies proved that she could be really, really funny. I mean, Working Girl, she got an Oscar for that.
Right.
It really shows how versatile Sigourney Weaver was.
Oh, she's a fantastic actress.
Yeah, she is probably like my either, if not my favorite, my second favorite actress. Because Ellen Ripley, Dana Barrett, I can't think of the name. Her character in Working Girl, where she is just the mean, nasty, manipulative boss, and then like Gwen DeMarco and all that. I mean, and then also was it Diane Fossey in Gorillas in the Mist?
Yeah.
She's just an incredible actress.
Yeah, and I'm always happy when she shows up, and like even in stupid things, like when she showed up in Paul, I'm like, that movie is what it is, and I enjoy it. But when she shows up, it's like, man, it's great that Sigourney Weaver's in this movie.
I have never really had a strong interest in seeing Cabin in the Woods, but I have always kind of wanted to see it because Sigourney Weaver's in it.
I don't like that movie, and she's barely in it, so.
Yeah, but the other kind of thing is it also has Chris Hemsworth, and I love Chris Hemsworth.
I feel like he's barely in it.
See, this is the thing. I remember reading. I used to get all these like trade magazines, movie magazines, and we used to get like movie books and stuff like that. And the thing that was always consistently said about Sigourney Weaver was that she was always a pitch perfect actress, and that she never gave a bad performance, no matter how stupid the movie was. I think there's like one film that she did in the mid 80s where she gives an off performance, one where she played I believe a prostitute, but I can't remember what the film was. But other than that, she's always fantastic to watch.
I think you mentioned that on our Galaxy Quest episode.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that movie. I want to say it stars Michael Caine, and she's supposed to be like a My Fair Lady type prostitute character, but it's just like over the top bad movie, and everyone who was in it just came off terrible.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the movie. I remember seeing some of it when I was back when I was in like junior high and high school, and I used to watch basically everything. But yeah, Dana's great. I love Dana.
Hey, I didn't know this. One of the concept artists on the film was Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah, I never knew that, but I can see, now that you mention it, I can see his design and drawing style in the look of a lot of the ghosts.
Yeah, we just got the Bernie Wrightson hardcover Frankenstein in at the store, and I really, really want to buy it, and I really shouldn't.
Oh,
but...
man, I own that. I bought that like 15 plus years ago.
I remember in high school when I started getting catalogs from Fantagraphics and seeing that and going, I really want that, but it's like $25, and I can't imagine paying $25 for a comic because I was in high school in the early 90s.
Yeah, it was much more expensive when I bought it.
I
went into my comic shop and I saw it and I was like, oh my god, I would love to get that. And then I kept seeing it, and then one day I went, you know what, heck with it, I bought it. And yeah, it's right next to my bed.
Excuse me.
Yeah, Bernie Wrightson is an artist I did not really get a chance to pay much attention to when I was a kid, mainly because I think he was largely out of the mainstream stuff by most of the 80s. But then whenever I started getting like the showcase collections and they started collecting all his work and that for like House of Mystery and
right.
all that stuff, and then I started buying and reading stuff like that, and then I started seeing all this work. He's actually one of my all-time favorite artists. I mean, the guy is just incredible draftsman.
Yeah, any of his Swamp Thing stuff or his Frankenstein stuff is must-see stuff.
Yeah, and his I can totally see his design aesthetic in a lot of the ghosts, now that it's mentioned.
The final character I wanted to talk about is Walter Peck, played by William Atherton. Did William Atherton play anybody in the 80s that was likable?
He was really likable on an episode of Murder, She Wrote, and that was in the 80s. I think I've mentioned that on this show before. It was the one where he is a blind man who's producing a line of books for the blind, and Jessica's recording narration for all her books for the blind on tape.
Mm-hmm.
And the premise is that he's in danger of losing his funding to do it because the president or the guy in charge of the recording studio and the company and that thinks that there's no way books on tape is going to be a thing. No one wants to listen to someone read a book. And so the guy ends up getting murdered, and he's basically framed because the murder was done in the dark when the power went off in the recording studio. And he was a blind man, so he's the only one who'd be able to find his way around. So he's framed, and he's this like really nice, sweet guy, and Atherton could play that, but he just got typecast in movies.
Yeah, well, between Ghostbusters and Die Hard, you think of him as a jerk.
Oh, it goes beyond that. The first.
Oh no, I know it does.
Or was Real Genius, where he's the mentor of all the young scientists and guys in the university and that. But then you find out that he's actually using them for nefarious military purposes, and he's making a whole bunch of money off them. You know, creating lasers for to kill people shoot from satellites from outer space. So yeah, he got typecast in that very early. That was before, around the same time as Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, the reason for that is he was so damn good at playing that. He could play sweet and very, very nice guys, but man, he could play the hell out of a jerk. The thing that makes this character of Walter Peck so great, and I see people, you and I had this conversation last week whenever we watched the movie. I see people all the time post articles and stuff on like lists of movie characters that were villains that were right. And the thing is, Walter Peck in Ghostbusters is absolutely right. His stance and the whole thing about the Ghostbusters having this unlicensed nuclear reactor in the middle of downtown New York, right in the middle of the island, and because he's supposed to be an agent for the EPA.
The EPA.
And he's completely within the right, and everything he says is exactly right. The problem is, and people forget this whenever they do those articles, he is in the right, but then he gets spiteful and argumentative because Peter's such a jerk to him. and he goes beyond that, and he ends up doing stupid stuff.
Right.
That endangers everything. Because he has an unlicensed nuclear reactor in the middle of Manhattan, and he just tells some regular electrician who's never seen anything remotely like this to just turn it off. There's going to be major ramifications, and he doesn't take any of the blame for that.
No, he starts off with a point. He goes to investigate, as he should. Peter's a jerk to him, and he just changes his entire personality changes to, I need to get revenge on this guy for being a jerk to me. You know.
And the thing is, up to that point, Peter being an infantile jerk, yeah, sure. But the thing is, it wasn't enough to justify him going, I'm going to take the whole force, the entire government down on them.
Right.
Like on bricks. He goes too far.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea that in the original screenplay and the original intent, but that it got edited out, was the I kind of wish it was in it, because it would kind of justify that a little more. But the idea that it was supposed to be revealed at the end that Peck was working for the cult of Ivor Shandor or Shankor.
Ivo Shandor.
I can't pronounce the damn names. and that he purposely shut it down to cause Armageddon and bring about the end of the world. And
I don't think I've ever heard that.
I don't think they ever actually filmed anything about it. I think it got exercised before the actual filming began. And I always thought that was like really interesting take. It would really completely justify how he just suddenly goes over the top.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard that. That it would explain a lot.
Yeah, I'm assuming that got removed whenever they ultimately decided to not go with Ivor as the big villain, and they brought in where he was originally going to be played by Paul Rubens in a suit, which to this day I still wish that actually happened, because I would have loved to have seen Paul Rubens play that. It
essentially does happen in Ghostbusters, the video game, but I don't believe it's Paul Rubens. But yes, Ivo Shandor is the main villain in.
Yeah, I think whenever they got rid of him and decided to go with something a little more flashier and sexier with the Eastern European supermodel with the overdubbed voice, I think that's whenever they probably decided to eliminate that aspect of Peck.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to look at the trivia for Ghostbusters on IMDb to see if I saw anything about that, and all of a sudden it won't let me look because it's... Okay, there we go. Because it was something to do with my account being signed in or not.
So you're not trying to just prove that I'm wrong?
No, I'm trying to... This interests me. I'm looking it up. In the DVD commentary, Ivan Reitman says he received a call from William Atherton complaining that the movie ruined his life. The character of Walter Peck was so hated that people would talk to Atherton as if they were giving the character Peck a piece of their mind. Apparently, more than once, physical fights have been started with Atherton in bars.
I feel so sorry for that man. Between that and then Die Hard, I mean, jeez, he's an actor. He played characters. It's a shame. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing that I always wanted to, I say this all the time, and I wanted to bring this up on the show. I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I believe the reason why the Republican Party of today are so against the EPA is because of the portrayal of the EPA, particularly Walter Peck, in this movie. This is not a recent theory. I've believed this for at least since the turn of the century. I have had this thought.
That would not surprise me, because the EPA in this film is trying to stop and mess around with entrepreneurs who were, it's almost like interfering with like libertarian guys who are just trying to do their own thing with their, bringing up this small town business that ends up becoming this big huge thing. And
right.
And so it kind of plays into the Fountainhead type stuff, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. I'm not saying it necessarily is, but I've
always thought that.
it occurs to me that I guess we're pretty much mostly done with the main characters.
With the characters, we're done. I mean, there's other minor characters that we could talk about, but
yeah, I was just thinking that I'm looking at my notes and I have a few things that I did not mention that favorite moments or explanations for certain things that happen in the movie that I think we should discuss.
Sure.
One is, okay, this is a thing that's been brought up a lot over the years, and that is, why was Peter Venkman carrying, what was it, 800 cc's of Thorazine?
It was a large amount of Thorazine.
Whenever he goes to Dana on the date night. And you and I came up with the theory. I had never thought of it before, but you and I came up with the theory during this last view of the movie that he may have gotten it from Dana's medicine cabinet. Like either she had like an illness or infection or something that she needed painkillers for in the past. Or my theory is that it was Thorazine that was left by her boyfriend, the musician, who you cannot tell me is not a drug addict.
Yeah, I mean, I always assumed he just got it.
He's doing cocaine.
Oh, yeah. Sorry to step on you there. I always assumed that he just got it from her medicine cabinet. Why she had it, I never thought about. I mean, it's an antipsychotic. It's used for bipolar. It's used for attention deficit disorder. I can't say the acronym for some reason. Even for nausea. So.
Right, but it's the kind of thing I could see a junkie using.
Oh yeah.
And you cannot convince me that musician, that is her friend, I'm assuming is her boyfriend or former boyfriend. I'm certain he's a cokehead because the way he acts. Oh, which, if that was the case, that makes the whole Peter with the I hope your cold gets better, sir. All the more better.
Yeah, because he's sniffling because of the coke, not because of.
Right.
I mean, we think, but.
Theory. It's just a theory.
Yeah, it's a good theory, though.
I think the point being, I think Peter gets the drugs from Dana's medicine cabinet. The other thing is, one of the other points I wanted to make is, one of the aspects I love about this movie so much is that whenever you come up to a scene that in any other movie would play in a very stereotypical way, this movie turns it on its head. The scene that I'm thinking about specifically in regards to this is the jail scene. Literally any other movie is going to have the nerd geek characters scared and intimidated by the burly, dangerous, psycho criminals who are in the jail with them. Elf even plays that stereotype where you have Buddy nervously sitting at the back wall in the middle of the jail, even though no one's paying any attention to him and everyone's basically ignoring him. But Ghostbusters turns it on the head by having the nerds completely dominate that jail cell to the point where all the other guys in there with them are all nervous and kind of almost climbing the walls and backing away and frankly they're scared. And Egon and Ray and Peter are just in command.
Right. I was going to save this for when we get to our star ratings, but something about this movie that's great that not enough people talk about is if you take out the humor, it still 100% works as a thriller, paranormal thriller / horror film.
Oh, 100% definitely.
And that scene that you're talking about illustrates that. Because it's not that, I mean, there are jokes in that scene, but it's not that funny of a scene. It's kind of an exposition dump of a scene.
Right.
But, it's a necessary one. I heard one time, Mark Bernardin, who's a movie reviewer, he also does podcasts with Kevin Smith, was talking about there was a revival of Ghostbusters at, a local theater. He took his son, and it was his son's first time seeing it. And his son was, I want to say he said it was like 6 or 7. And he said they had to leave after 40 minutes because the humor was completely over his son's head. And his son was just absolutely terrified of the movie. Because the absence of the humor made it a super effective horror movie. and he couldn't handle it.
Yeah, as soon as you said 6 years old, my first thought was that is way too young to see this movie. My nephew is 12 now. I can't remember how long ago. I think it was 5 years ago. My sister and I were babysitting my nephew and my niece, and my nephew would talk about how he had seen Ghostbusters a lot. He really loved the movie, and we were trying to find a movie to watch with the kids, and he kept saying he wanted to watch Ghostbusters. He watched it all the time with his mother and his father, and I can completely see them playing the movie for him and him watching it with them because it's a comedy and the kind of goofy, sarcastic comedy that fits completely with my sister and my brother-in-law's sensibilities. My younger sister, his mother. So I get the movie, and I was immediately skeptical because I remember myself being 10 or 11 seeing it for the first time and being absolutely terrified in the first couple of minutes just because of the library ghost. And my nephew at the time was 7 or maybe 8. I'm pretty sure 7. And I was really leery about getting the movie and putting it on. So I go, okay, if you've seen it before, we'll watch it. So I go get the movie. I'm putting it on. And my nephew's on the couch. He's going, oh my god, oh my god, and he's saying this, oh my god, and he's like getting the pillow ready and that. He's like he's psyching himself up to get terrified. And I haven't even put the movie in at this point, but I put the movie in. I go, and I'm just side-eyeing him. I put the movie in. We put the movie, and it starts up, and we're watching, and he's going, oh god, oh god, oh god, and he's like slowly pulling the pillow up, and I had the impression that it's kind of like a roller coaster where the cliche of the roller coaster, and it's fun to get scared at movies like this, and I'm aware of that, but I'm watching him basically working himself up, and all the library stuff's gone, and we got the introduction where you have Peter and that, and then he gets to the library, and then they start to make their way, and my nephew is getting more and more worked up, and I go, you know what, we're stopping this movie now, because I know the ghost is showing up in like about 10 seconds, and there's no way this kid's sitting through that. So I just said, yeah, we're stopping this. I got up, turned it off, put on something else, some cartoon, I can't remember what it was, but the point is that, yeah, you take out the comedy, or if you don't get the comedy, the movie still works as a horror film.
Right.
Especially for a certain age, it is very, very scary. It's one of the things. This goes back to the conversation with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It works completely as a comedy, and like really sarcastic comedy, but it also works as a genuine haunted house ghost horror movie, and I love that about this film.
Mm-hmm. So I have here for us to discuss our...
That's what's so great about this movie, is that it's sarcastic, the movie is sardonic, and it doesn't take anything serious, except for the horror aspects.
Right.
Everything governmental is made to look, ridiculous and idiotic. People act like idiots, but certain characters are not compromised, and situations are not compromised.
Well, as we were saying with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, you respect the monsters. There's
right.
All this stuff can be going on, but the monsters have to be genuinely scary for this type of movie to work.
The Ghostbusters are goofballs, but Dana is never compromised as a character.
Right.
Even after she becomes possessed. And the haunting stuff is never compromised. They get to the hotel, their very, very first case, and Peter's the insulting guy, the jerk, the dork, and he gets attacked by the ghost, and that's the moment where, he gets slimed, and it all becomes real.
Mm-hmm.
I really love this movie because, it's all this hidden depth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So layered.
So I have written here for us to discuss our favorite lines. I feel like we've done that a lot throughout the the review as it is. I will say this is a movie that is endlessly quotable. Being a role player, playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, I cannot tell you how many times around the table I've heard, "I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it." That just gets said all the time. Dealing with any sort of massive paranormal demigod or demon, so someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes, comes up all the time in role playing. A quotable line, a line I've quoted a ton that you would probably not suspect. My first real high school girlfriend was she played clarinet in the school band, and I would constantly tell her, you're the best one in your row. And she never could figure it out. I'm like, it's from Ghostbusters.
I love that. Yeah, there's so much about this movie that is so subtle and is just hilarious, and it goes beyond just the funny lines. It's that even the character actors, people in small roles, get these moments of really, really funny beats, even if they don't even say anything. Mm-hmm. One moment that I absolutely love in this film is whenever they're in the mayor's office and Peter is buttering up the mayor, saying, "Lenny, think of the voters. You'll go down as the mayor who saved New York City." And Lenny, the mayor, glances over at the cardinal, and the cardinal
who's his friend Mike, but yeah.
Right. And Mike just nods and goes, mm-hmm, type.
Yeah, it's great.
And I love that moment. And it's from this guy. I didn't even know who the guy is who's playing Mike the Cardinal.
Yeah.
But he's so good in that one moment. And this film is filled with those kind of moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Even like, my favorite thing that Janine does in the whole movie is dropping off or picking up when the cop comes to the...
Yeah. Oh, this movie is so good.
Yeah, I mean, anything about, collect spores, molds, and fungus, and print is dead, and there's just endless lines, and what a shame, or no, what a crime when she says nothing ever happened in there,
Janine saying, "You're so kind to take in this man," and Egon saying, "I don't think he's human."
Yeah, you're a real humanitarian. I don't think he's human.
Oh, God. Oh,
I'm fuzzy on the whole good bad thing. That's another one that comes up role playing all the time.
I don't care. This is one of the greatest movies of all time. This is Ghostbusters. What did I write in the post on Facebook whenever we watched it?
I don't know.
I remember. I said we're watching. Yeah, I made the post. I said we're watching Ghostbusters in preparation for recording it as the main topic on the next episode of the Derek and Matt Love Comics podcast. And then later, 2 lines down, I wrote, "Yeah, because it's blank Ghostbusters."
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. So another thing I want to talk about very quickly is the technology of Ghostbusters. One of the things when I watched this as a kid, I probably didn't get all the sardonic humor. I got the slapstick humor, but I didn't get all the sardonic humor, and I started understanding that as I got older. But I was always fascinated by the technobabble in this movie. I think it is some of the best technobabble in any production of anything. And they I remember, I got that Scholastic book you're talking about, and some of the stuff would talk about, the equipment, and it's like, I wanted to know how the traps worked. I wanted to know how the proton packs worked. How the charge, he mentions proton charging, so I wanted to know how they charge the things. I want to know how the containment unit worked. Every little piece of technology, there's all those tubes and everything on the car. What does all that stuff do?
Everything I've ever heard about this movie, and in regards to the technobabble and all the technology and the supernatural aspects, all of that is attributed to Dan Aykroyd.
It doesn't surprise me.
A lot of people don't get this. Is Dan Aykroyd has an extensive background when it comes to stuff dealing with the paranormal, ufology, the supernatural, and technological stuff like this. His father is considered, mainstream science is going to consider it junk stuff, but his father is considered an expert in the paranormal and is an author who wrote many published books about the paranormal and all kinds of stuff dealing with all this kind of stuff. So Dan Aykroyd is the closest thing you're going to come to Ray Stantz in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
He basically was Ray Stantz. The other thing was that I think Harold Ramis has even said it before that Aykroyd was the only guy who could just read off and recite all that technical babble without pausing or stopping that, because he knew all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that is really it's Aykroyd.
But yeah, I wanted to, like the thing that Peter's doing in Dana's apartment with those little squeezy thing. I want to know what that thing does.
That's another one of my favorite little moments where she says, "Are you sure you're using that thing correctly?" And he said, "Well, I think so."
Why does Ray need those goggles when they're in the Sedgwick to single out Slimer when the other guys can obviously see him? What do those goggles do? All that stuff fascinates me, and it always did. And it's one of the things that I give credit to the remake for, because I felt like they did their own thing with the tech. They didn't just copy the same tech, and they made it as interesting.
Right, and they gave us new tech.
They gave us new tech, and it was as interesting. Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the remake. But no, I mean, Ecto 1 is one of my all-time favorite movie TV cars.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It is so iconic. The look of this movie is iconic. From the proton packs,
right?
The jumpsuits, the car, the firehouse, the iconic Ghostbusters symbol.
Mm-hmm.
This movie's a really strange, like, just this incredible moment of pop culture where everything just clicked and it just ended up becoming something so much bigger than anyone would have rightly predicted. Yeah, I can't imagine anyone actually thought that this was going to be a huge hit, let alone become like one of the most beloved franchises ever.
Right. I have a picture of myself. We went to one of the towns near me does movies in the park in the summer, and they did Ghostbusters one weekend on this particular year, and my girlfriend at the time and I went. And it was really it was one of the things where it was her idea because she knew how much I loved Ghostbusters. And we went to the event, and they have, believe it or not, there is a group called the Northwest Indiana Ghostbusters, and they show up in full uniforms with full proton packs, equipment, traps, everything, and not an ambulance, but in like a white hatchback vehicle that they've got made up like an Ecto vehicle, with the sirens and the logos and everything. And then there's a picture of me posing with the two guys that I've got, and there's a picture of me standing in front of the car, and I'm pointing, doing like when they go, "We're ready to believe you." I'm doing that pose, and it was just like, we were there, we knew those guys were coming, the movie hadn't started yet, we were getting something to eat, and all of a sudden I just hear the siren, and I'm like 5 years old going, it's coming in,
Oh, yeah.
Because, again, we've talked about those sounds from movies that just hit that part of your brain and you know exactly what it is. And they're endless in this movie. The siren, the proton streams, just even to a degree, like the traps, like the PKE meter, it's just those sound effects that from movies that just, you're never going to forget it.
The thing that's kind of making me sad right now is realizing how much more that we can actually talk about this movie and that we're not going to get the chance. I barely touched on Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. The brilliance of this movie, even setting up the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man earlier in the film, like we see the one ad, and then Dana, whenever she comes home with the groceries, and she puts the bag of Stay Puft marshmallows on her counter.
Mm-hmm.
There was just so much more we could talk about this film.
Yeah.
It's not going to get the chance.
Yeah, I mean, we've been recording over 3 hours. We've barely scratched the surface on a movie that we both absolutely love and could talk about endlessly. I mean, I literally could talk about this movie forever. You know, there's so much to say about it, and there's so much I love about it. You know, so just really quickly, I wanted to hit this because we were talking about it earlier. I was looking at Wikipedia and I saw Louis Tully was originally conceived as we barely talk about Louis, as a conservative man in a business suit, and would have been played by John Candy, who was not able to commit. Rick Moranis instead portrays...
my understanding is that John Candy was actually cast, but he then told them that I'm going to play it with a Polish accent.
I've heard that too, yes. But that's not what he was written for.
Right. And they objected, so they actually fired him, and they ended up hiring Rick Moranis as a last-minute change, because I believe John Candy actually did some filming for the movie. I'm actually not 100% sure if any of this is actually true or not, or just rumors.
Moranis instead portrays the character as a geek. Gozer was originally to appear in the form of Ivo Shandor, a slender, unremarkable man in a suit, played by Paul Rumens. That's what you were talking about earlier. However, the role ultimately went to Yugoslav model Slavica Jovan. The demonic voice of Gozer is provided by Patty Edwards. So this is the part I really wanted to get to. According to Ernie Hudson, an earlier version of the script had his character, Winston, in a larger role with an elaborate backstory as an Air Force demolitions expert. Excited by the part, he agreed to the job for half his usual salary. The night before shooting began, he was given a new script with a greatly reduced role. Reitman told him that the studio wanted to expand Murray's role. In a 2015 article for Entertainment Weekly, Hudson wrote, "I love the character, and he's got some great lines, but I feel the guy was just kind of there. I love the movie, I love the guys. I'm very thankful to Ivan for casting me. I'm very thankful to fans who appreciate the Winston character, but it's always been frustrating. It's kind of a love-hate thing, I guess."
Yeah, it's really sad, because Ernie Hudson's a great actor, and the character, yeah, he's just not served well in the first film. It's really the second one where they started actually giving him stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the character was much better served in stuff like the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and then the comics, and especially the Ghostbusters video game from, 10 years ago?
I don't think it's been quite that long, but yeah.
I would actually like to see I'm going to assume that they're actually on YouTube, the full cutscenes from that video game.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they are.
I mean, find that and watch it as Ghostbusters 3.
I don't know that as a fact, but it seems like something that you would certainly be able to find. I'm trying to find the date of that Ghostbusters video game. 2009. So it is, almost 10 years. Wow, man. And I never finished that game.
I never got it.
Yeah, the problem... okay, so that game was great. The problem with that game was that when you died, it was like a 3 to 4 minute load for you to get back into the game. And at a certain point, I just stopped playing the game because of that.
Yeah, oh, God. So it was much more of a technical issue.
Mm-hmm. The actual game, like the game mechanics, playing the Ghostbusters were great. There's quite frankly an alien moment, or an aliens moment in it, where you're in this room and you're searching with the PKE meter, and you're like, it should be here, and then I'm like, wait, I've seen Aliens, and I look up and the thing's on the ceiling, and I mean they play it exactly like that for that reason, you know. So yeah, it's a good game, but that little issue with it stopped me from finishing. I think I got I would imagine I got pretty far, because I did play it a lot, and I did go through a lot of huge encounters, but I don't know how long the game actually was. It amazes me that it's been that long.
I was really interested in getting the game, but I wasn't sure what platform it was being released on, and I don't have any game systems, or at least I still don't have any game systems, but I especially did not have any at that time.
Yeah, I had it on PlayStation 3, and it played great. It just loaded forever after you were defeated or killed in a spot, and you had to reload to come back in. But I redid all the Sedgwick level. I did the new fight with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, all that stuff. I think it was when I was actually getting into the newer stuff that I stopped playing as much. All right, so
it's possible to find a ROM of that.
Probably.
I wouldn't even know where to begin to look. Oh well.
Getting on to our rating. Derek, we're gushing over this movie. What are you giving it?
1.5. Are you kidding? I'm giving it a 5-star rating. This is one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time. I love Ghostbusters. On any given day, if I'm honest, I might actually love Ghostbusters more than any other movie, even Jaws.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with 5 stars. It's in my top 10. It's my highest rated comedy.
I'm going to say Jaws is my favorite movie, and this is the movie I've said is my favorite movie for like 25 years. And Ghostbusters is officially my number 3 movie. Oh man, I can watch Ghostbusters repeatedly.
Yeah.
Watch higher level of rewatchability.
And we've established we have watched them repeatedly.
Yeah, this is definitely like one of the films I've watched the most in my life, if not the one I've watched the most.
Okay, so we are not done talking about Ghostbusters because we'll just hit it now. We're going to talk about Ghostbusters 2 next week. And I would recommend anybody go back and find our review of the Ghostbusters reboot because we had to, well, it was more me than you, but had to defend our opinion of that film this week when we were talking about this film on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand by what I said then, and I stand by what I say now. It's not as bad of a film as people make it out to be, and I think it does a lot of things right. And if you want to know what we think about that, go find that episode. So that is Derek and Matt Love Comics for the week. Remember that you can contact us, Derek and Matt Love Comics at gmail.com, on Facebook.com/Derek and Matt, on Twitter at Derek and Matt, on Instagram at Derek and Matt, on YouTube, Derek and Matt Love Comics channel. Find us on iTunes, Podbeam, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. I almost couldn't speak there. And subscribe to us on your platform of choice, or give us a rating on iTunes. It does help the show. For any information about Galactic Gregs, visit galacticgregs.com or Facebook/Galactic Gregs. Remember the sale at the end of the month, 27th to 28th, and Halloween Comic Fest. Next week on Derek and Matt Love Comics, I already said it, it's Ghostbusters 2 from 1989. Music for this episode is the hero theme and adventure meme by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Derek, any last words?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Gozer the Gozerian, good evening. As a duly designated representative of the city, county, and state of New York, I order you to cease any and all supernatural activity and return forthwith to your place of origin or the nearest convenient parallel dimension.